Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Winter had come. The evenings were already quite dark outside. Second shift at school. Just finished the last class. "Maria, you have no idea what I saw," whispered one boy in my ear. The calmest girls in the class. "It's unbelievable." "Do you want me to tell you in confidence? But you can't tell anyone." The girl looked at her classmate in bewilderment. Maria was not one of those who are ready to get involved in all sorts of adventures. Especially tomorrow, there were a lot of lessons to do. "Go for it. No one in our class knows about it." Another boy came up to her. "It's so cool. You'll love it." The girl packed her bag and headed for the exit. The two boys kept up with her. "So it's true what Lenka said about you?" "You mean the psycho?" Finally, one of the classmates went all in. "And we thought it was all a lie." "I'm not afraid," said the schoolgirl resolutely. "All right, let's go, but quickly. Because I have to do my homework before Mom comes." The hooligans rejoiced, lost their hands. One of them quickly ran forward. He reached the unfamiliar Maria office and yanked the door. The door was closed, but to the girl's surprise, one of the classmates quickly pulled some kind of key out of his pocket and opened it. The classroom was dark. "Keep the lights off," one of the boys ordered. "Because we care." "Come on, open the back room," he commanded. The second one in the dark finally managed to open the right room and entered it. Maria went in with them. "Well?" the girl asked them. "What's the big deal?" She looked at the barely visible silhouettes of her classmates. "You'll see." The leader shouted briskly and pushed the girl into the back room. The hooligans quickly ran out of the room. One of them held the door while the other locked it. Maria quickly got to her feet and ran to the door. "Open up. What are you doing?" She struggled. "Alex, well, let me out of here now." But the boys had already locked the study door and ran downstairs. They both chuckled quite a bit. That would be hilarious when they found her tomorrow. Would they bust their bellies laughing as they ran home? Well, good, you made duplicate keys. I can only imagine what would happen to her if she found the light and turned it on. Laughing all the way to Alex, who started the whole thing. Why the boys decided to make fun of their classmate Maria, they did not know exactly. She was just a quiet girl, and Alex always wanted to do something so that the girl experienced pain or humiliation. Maria was smart beyond her years, and that put a lot of pressure on the boys. Alex was from a dysfunctional family. He was not particularly loved there and never wanted. But Maria looked like a neat, well-groomed girl. They always came to all the meetings. She was praised for her tests and dictations. And Will was a fool. He never knew about friends. He saw Alex as some kind of important figure. That was mostly just in his language. In reality, his friend was cowardly and unreliable. Maria tried to break down the door, but the child's strength was so insignificant compared to the back room that had been stormed by more than one generation of children that it was like it was made of metal. "Mommy, Mommy," screamed the girl. "Help! Somebody! Help! Let me out!" But no one heard her. The school was completely deserted. The guard had gone around several times and didn't see anything suspicious. How long Maria had been crying, she didn't know. But at one point she realized that her eyes had gotten used to the darkness and began to see. Especially through the crack under the door, there was some light. The girl got up from the floor and tried to look around. No, she shouted at the top of her voice when she saw a skeleton near the wall. No, she screamed again and lost consciousness. Outside the window, it was snowing, and Alex and Will were coming home happy. They had pulled off such a big deed that they saw themselves as real heroes. On the way, the boys saw a big trash can and threw their keys into it. Both realized they had to get rid of the evidence so they wouldn't be suspected of anything. What would Maria say? They didn't care. The boys were sure that no one would believe her. An expensive car pulled up in front of a high-rise office center. A young man got out of it and headed toward the left wing, where a large sign for Jaguar Publishing hung. The guy opened the door and, without looking around, went straight to the director's office. "Hi, Max." The man tore himself away from his papers. "Are you on business or what?" "Sorry, I don't have much time." Dad, I need money. The principal didn't hear anything new. Can you give me some? Max, will I ever hear from you that you came to help me? The man replied sternly. Or do I have to deprive you of everything first? But don't start, the boy remarked. I haven't graduated yet, and you and I agreed that I would get up to speed. Only then Mark Austin gave him a displeased look and took his wallet out of his pocket. He pulled out a few bills and tossed them defiantly on the table. I hope that's enough, Father asked coldly. Can you leave me alone now? I have a new issue of the magazine coming out. Yes, please. Grabbing the money from the table, happily headed for Max's door. Don't you know the word thank you at all? Mark Austin grumbled unhappily. Thank you. The son shouted at the top of his voice. I'll never forget it. He began to play the comedy. Idiot, whispered Max. With a satisfied look, went out of the publishing house. Well, Leoka, now hold on. The guy again jumped into the car and drove towards a familiar cafe. There near the door, his friend Martin was already waiting for him. What took you so long? He asked unhappily. I'm freezing here. Let's hurry up and warm up. No problem, Martin winked at his friend. I've just been to my father's, so I'll order. The young men ordered a pizza and a beer. The guys had been friends for years, but when they met freshman year, Max got punched in the face for his attitude. Hey, why are you looking at me like that? Asked a fellow student, tall blonde. It is from me that you have such a face, unhappily tried to spread his tail turkey. Or I'll show you where you belong. I don't give a damn about you, the boy said. So sit down and keep your mouth shut. What did you say? Max jumped up from the table. Are you trying to get in trouble? Somebody needs me. Martin turned away from him. Your mirror's fooling you. Trust me, you're not so tough. Let's get out of here. The guy clenched his fists. I'll show you which one of us needs to look at himself in the mirror. Come on, agreed the classmate. But don't whine and call your daddy afterwards. Max, being the son of a rich man with connections, always felt right. But he didn't know that Martin had a black belt in karate. So as soon as the guy attacked a fellow student with fists, he took him to the ground in 2 moves. For Max, it was the first time in his life he saw from the outside that he wasn't so tough. Let me help you up, Martin held out his hand to his opponent. I hope this will be enough. Yes, Max replied briefly, and like a dog with his tail up, he walked back into the auditorium. Another 6 months passed, and by the end of the first year, Max and Martin became inseparable. A classmate realized that behind the arrogant nature and friend hides a sensitive and honest guy. What's what, but Max never broke his word, even if he had to answer for it. Martin over time taught the guy to control his emotions, and Max, you could say, stopped being so hot-tempered and no longer got into fights over nothing. Not only a friend had such an influence on the guy, but Martin himself realized that Max taught him to take risks and try something new in life, and the latter was always easy to deal with, even when friends got into very big trouble. Max's optimism and sense of humor helped them both get out of it. People, I'm fed up with my ancestor and his publishing house, Max sighed. I don't want to get involved in all this. I still have time to finish my degree, and then I have to get a job with him. That's why I'm telling you that we need to finish our work from the beer from the bottle, answered the friend. If we do well, we'll have our own business. You won't have to inherit your father's business anymore. Jesus, if someone had told me a few years ago that I was going to do that, I would have told them to go for it, Max laughed. I even have to lie to my father about needing money for entertainment. You tell him on the merry-go-round? Martin laughed. I'll tell you about our case. I'll tell you what, with your irrepressible power, it's the very thing. Instead of all your squabbles, you're doing a noble thing now. You're helping the whole of life, you might say. Yeah, Max laughed. Call me a messa. He choked on his beer. When everyone finds out, I'll be laughed at. Max, I don't care what other people say about us. His friend looked at him seriously. I know that all great men started somewhere. It's not that I want to be great. It's just that I want to do something useful for others. That's what I'm all about. What's the point of being the richest? Well, you have everything then, what? Counting your money every day. We have nothing. You and me, we started from scratch. Another man will look at us and say, Maybe I can do something like that. Do you know how many years I've dreamed of getting my black belt? How much work I've done? And what? Somebody will say it'll help me defend myself in life. Oh yeah, will I catch bullets on the fly with my teeth? Or will I be able to grab a knife flying at me from behind on the fly? It's all nonsense. If it's for self-discipline, yes. Karate has helped me a lot in my life, but you can discipline yourself in more gentle ways. Martin, I know you're right about something, my friend replied. But I haven't gone through it all yet, so I can't look at things the way you do. You remember how many experiments Edison did, how much material didn't fit. I'm not even talking about Tesla. Nobody believed in him at all. He worked as a laborer for years just to continue his research. 2 years ago, when friends went on vacation to the river, Martin in his head flashed a strange idea. Guys came to their favorite place, but just could not recognize it. What kind of people do we have? Martin was indignant. Where he is, there is a constant shit. But why can't you clean up after yourself? The guy wouldn't stop. You could at least put all the garbage in bags. I hate it. Yes, it's a good thing we didn't take the girls this time. Max rubbed his head. You could say the whole vacation is ruined. He sighed and went to the river. There were plastic bottles, bags, disposable dishes lying everywhere. Some even floated in the river not far from the shore. The mood of the friends was at zero. Martin came over and sat down next to Max. They were both silent for a long time. Suddenly the guy jumped up. You know, Max, if I could fix all this, I would not spare my strength, said Martin. What do you mean? His friend looked at him in bewilderment. Put guards at all the vacation spots. No, a thought flashed through the boy's mind. That would be pointless. I could make something useful out of this garbage. It's been recycled for a long time, Max said. But you see, it doesn't work, Max. I've heard that polymers are used to make gasoline and methane in the laboratory, Martin reasoned. Which means we're dealing with organics, right? Well, his friend didn't understand. What do you mean by that? I'm not a chemistry geek. Which means we could take it all back to the original materials. A light bulb went off in Martin's head. Hydrogen, hydrogen? At a loss, Max asked. What's hydrogen got to do with it? I don't understand anything. What are you trying to tell me? But it's so easy. The boy was delighted. Hydrogen is the most common element on Earth, but it's always in a bound form. If we could get it freely, it would be cooler than gasoline and electricity. I think I read somewhere about hydrogen engines. The guy's starting to remember. Martin, it's so complicated. That's what everybody thinks, sighed the friend. Nobody wants to do it. That's why you and I are in this mess right now. Our people aren't ready to clean up after themselves. So we have to think of something else. If you and I could get hydrogen from this garbage and develop our own hydrogen engine, do you realize what a turnaround that would be? That's what Max has become. I'm not in the loop on this whole thing. You want me to go around picking up trash, and then something explodes in our lab, and you and I go to the afterlife. No, thanks. I'd rather finish my econ degree someday and work at my dad's publishing house. Leave me alone. Didn't you see the movie October Sky? I didn't give up all of a sudden. Nobody believed that the main character would launch his own rocket. But he did. So we'll launch our own hydrogen engine. For the first 3 months, Martin tried to persuade Max to join his experiments, but he was reluctant. Martin began to disappear more and more often in his garage, which his father gave him. Mother of God. One day a friend of Martin's came to see him. He was looking at some test tubes and instruments, showing him something with interest. He's pointing at some kind of vessel that looks like a balloon. And that's what it is. Without distracting from his work, said suddenly there is gaseous hydrogen in a compressed state. Did you get it? In shock, asked Max. You got it from garbage. Yes, smiled Martin. From the garbage that was lying by the river. Max was so amazed by what he saw. From that day on, he visited his friend more and more often. You come with me, the guy once suggested to him. Unfortunately, for now, I have to get the raw materials myself. You want to pick up trash? Martin's friend looked at him in amazement. Are you serious? No, of course I'll go with you, he laughed. But only for fun. I want to watch you from the sidelines. Martin had been filling the old bags with bags and plastic for almost 2 hours. The full bags he was tying up and hiding so he could take them on his bike to his garage later. By God, Max approached him. "Quit this dirty business," he said unhappily. "You're like a bum who collects for a bottle." "I don't care how I look from the outside," Martin said. "You know, there was a man who planted trees in a deserted place somewhere in England." Everybody looked at him and they all turned their fingers. But then, when that very spot grew into a gorgeous forest, he and his family had a great time there. So he who laughs last laughs. And yet, after a while, Max couldn't stand it any longer and joined his friend. Getting hydrogen was no longer a problem for the boys. But to build their own engine, they needed not only knowledge, but also a lot of money. Max has to beg his father for money time and time again. So he and Martin pieced together one part after another for their project. Max was still in shock at himself. The guy loved fun girl parties. And how he traded it all in for hours of hanging out in a stinky old garage. The guy couldn't understand. "Martin, Nancy won't talk to me anymore. It's like a friend's gone off the deep end. We're stuck here all the time. You want me to give my whole life to science? That's fine. Ignore him," the friend said. "Your girlfriend should be a companion, a friend, not this misunderstanding with pumped-up lips. What can you talk to her about? Imagine there are very interesting conversations between a girl and a guy. Look, Max started it. I don't know how you live without girls after you made that fool. Have you forgotten about the female gender? All right, that's enough. We need to go out in public, or I'll go crazy with your hydrogen." The boy protested. "We're going to a nightclub tonight." "What are we going to do there?" Martin looked at him in bewilderment. "What?" and before rubbed his hands together in anticipation. "First, we'll get drunk. Then we'll find 2 beauties and spend an unforgettable night with them." "You go, but I have to work," Martin objected. "Especially I have to work until morning." "As you wish, but I'm going for good. I thought I'd bring you a beer. Maybe you'll cheer yourself up at least this way." "I don't drink at work," the guy replied briefly and fully immersed himself in his work. Max had a stormy night. The guy rested 100%. His mother barely woke him up. The next morning, "Max, have you been drinking again?" His father looked at him unhappily. "I'll Martin you all your pocket money." The boy wasn't happy himself. His head was rattling at the seams and he couldn't even get out of bed. "I'd rather have his hydrogen chasing him," he thought. "You wouldn't have a headache in the morning." After that, Max's late-night drinking stopped. Of course, he missed the company of women very much. But Martin's invention had drawn him in so much that he sometimes completely forgot about it. And after nearly a year, the boys went into a stupor. They tried revving their engine back and forth, but they couldn't get what they wanted out of it. "Martin, what about him? Well, why don't we just leave it? Why do we have to reinvent the wheel?" Max was indignant. "Let's make one like everyone else's." Back in 1806, this Frenchman, as it was invented by François Isaac de Rivas, reminded Martin. "But that's the thing, I don't want to repeat what was or is. And you know why. Because if it worked that well, all cars would have been running on hydrogen long ago. But they don't. So there's something wrong here. Martin, I've already had my say. I'm an honest-to-goodness friend. We've been working on this for almost 2 years, but it's not right. Max, we need to look for like-minded people." A friend came up with an idea. "Now, when there is the internet, we could cooperate with someone. Maybe we could find a solution together. What do you suggest?" "Call out," sighed the friend. "I don't know any idiots like us anymore." "All right, I'll look into it." Tiredly sat down on the chair guy. "Let's take a break for now." "I'm tired too," Martin said in a fictitious voice. Finally, 2 weeks later, a friend called Max and told him that he had found something. The young men were sinking their beer. "Martin, come on, tell me." Max asked him impatiently. "Did you manage to find anyone?" "Yes," he answered briefly. "And I'm still in complete shock. You have no idea who I met on the internet." "Who?" Curiosity made the guy tan. "Did you get to meet a great mind?" "Yes. Her name is Maria." Looked at him carefully, friend. "And she is a real genius." What's the woman's astonishment? "All of a sudden you're mocking me?" No woman would understand your hydrogen, and this one does, smiled Martin. We're going to Detroit next week. Maria agreed to meet us. Where? Detroit. No, you're out of your mind, his friend said. Where's Salt Lake City and where's Detroit? So what? Are we taking the train? Ignoring his friend's protests, Martin said. So get ready. All right, let's say she's a megabrain. Then why can't she communicate with us on the internet? Looking for flaws. Max, how do you figure that? His friend looked at him in bewilderment. If she has assembled a new hydrogen engine, how will you understand it on the internet? You have to see and feel everything there. I don't know, tried to change Martin's mind. A friend. Well, let her record some video and send it to you. Max, come on, really, stop whining, cut the guy off. Let's just think about where we're gonna stay. I don't think we'll have a problem with that. Unexpectedly answered the friend. My cousin lives there on my mother's side. True, we have not communicated with him for a long time, but I think we can try. We'll rent a hotel in case of emergency. I've already warned my cousins, Martin replied. But my father can only give me a little. And as you know, I'm not working anywhere with my invention yet. God, I can't wait to finish the institute. Well, don't worry about the money. I'll talk to my father, Max suggested. I think he won't object to our trip. I'll say that I want to visit my mom's relatives, that they've been asking me for a long time. And then, after the defense of the diploma, so in his publishing house, so twisted, that more and will not see them. That's what Max thought. His father gave him money for the trip without any problems. The boy found his cousin's phone number somewhere, and in a few days he and Martin were on the train to Detroit. Hey Max, hugged the guy's cousin with his thick arms. It's been a long time. I never thought I'd see you again. Well, hello, brother. The guest rejoiced. But I'm not alone. I'm with a friend. This is Martin. And I'll tell you honestly, we're here on business. All right, let's go, the guy suggested. We'll talk at home. It's my day off. The cousin was 2 years older than Max. In general, it was a sad story for his family, or rather, for his mother Nicole was from a small village near Detroit. They lived poorly despite the fact that his parents had worked in the collective farm all their lives. They had never been able to get a proper house. And the problem was the woman's mother. For as long as Nicole could remember, her mother had been drinking all her life. Naturally, there was no supervision for the children, and there were two of them, the woman and her younger sister. And as they say, the latter followed in her footsteps. When Nicole turned 18, she immediately went to Detroit. Here the girl worked in a store. One day, a handsome young man came in there. It was obvious that he was a commuter. The guy looked at her, and he liked the girl at first sight. So Mark took Nicole to his house. Lucy, her younger sister, married a Muscovite. He was a troublemaker from the beginning. That's how they started drinking together. They had 2 sons. One died as a boy. The child strangled everything with a bag that he put on his head. Naturally, none of the parents were watching him. So, as they say, to the meeting. My cousin put a bottle of vodka on the table. We'd like to abstain for now. Martin said no right away, sorry, we have an important meeting today, so we'd like something lighter. Do you have any tea? Are you kidding me? Tea? The owner laughed. All right, I'll do it myself. He poured himself a cut glass. The guests looked at him in bewilderment. Max began to realize that he had made a big mistake in staying with his cousin. Not only did he seem to be drinking, but his apartment, which he had inherited from his parents, was a mess. It smelled like the place had been lived in by bums who hadn't been cleaned in years. Martin and Max looked at each other. You have a case here, you say. The guy brought the bread to his nose after emptying the glass. Come on, tell me what you've got going on. Anything I can do to help. We're here to see a scientist of yours, Martin said. There's a genius living here? Really? The owner looked at him in surprise. And who does what? She deals with alternative fuels. Max tried to change the subject from drinking. Her name is Maria. Maria is in shock, said the brother. You came here to meet Maria. Do you know her? The cousin guessed. Does that name sound familiar to you? No, answered the boy quickly. It's the first time I've heard of her. I just thought you came to the man's house. But you did. It just so happens that it is a girl who deals with such a complicated topic. Martin smiled. All right, God be with her, with this Maria. The host poured himself another glass. I'll drink and go to bed then. And when will you go to your business? Just lock the door. I have a second key. If I need it, I'll open myself from the inside. Max and his friend were in complete shock. They watched in silence as the guy dried the whole bottle. Without saying a word, he got up from the table and retired to his bed. Brother, I think we'll probably leave right after the meeting. Try to find a reason, Max. So what are you then? Let us not be able to see you. Ah well, have a happy journey, muttered through the pillowmaster and turned away on the other side. What was that? Martin couldn't calm down. I don't have any options. What can this man be called? I also have perfect hair came out of Max's apartment. God, it's been years since I've seen him, and I really hope it's the last time. We'd better get a hotel. The guys couldn't recover for a long time. They still had 3 hours left before meeting Maria, and they wandered aimlessly around Detroit. You know, of course, I love antiques, but not so much. Looking at an old church, said Martin. Frankly, it's all weighing on me. A friend agreed with me too. It feels like there is nothing to breathe. There seems to be a lot of space and a river, but it's still not Salt Lake City. Finally, the time was up, and the guys went to the cafe that Maria had indicated in her letter. I can't understand why she doesn't call, Max said in bewilderment. No, she has to write. She's got this obsession. How would I know? The friend said. Maybe she's keeping her distance so that everything is official. The young people approached a cafe with the symbolic name Maria's Pastry Shop. A beautiful blonde girl stood at the door. At the sight of Max and Martin, she smiled broadly and approached them. Are you Maria? Martin guessed. Do we look so different from the local guys? He said jokingly. The girl smiled and said nothing. She just waved her hand, and the whole procession went to the table near the window. The girl was holding a strange object. The guys had never seen anything like that before. Maria quickly grabbed what looked like a pen and began to write. I am very happy to meet you, read Martin. It is important to me that you are interested in my work, and I am ready to discuss it with you. I'm sorry, but we'll have to communicate like this because I can't talk. Max slammed down the big lump that came up to his throat. The guy looked at the girl more closely. Maria's blue eyes were just glowing. Maria, don't worry, everything is fine. Martin tried to come to his senses. There's no problem with that. The young people talked for a long time. It was mainly Martin who delved into the subtleties. Max kept looking at Maria. God, how is this possible? He thought, such an amazing girl. She's a real genius. But a mute shiver ran down his spine. She can't speak, and it doesn't seem to bother her at all. That's the kind of willpower I wish I had. I've always envied Lige for his stamina. But Maria, it's incredible. The girl as if read his thoughts and looked at him with interest. After a few seconds, she, embarrassed, and lowered her eyes. After they drank tea and completely sorted out Maria's ideas, she invited them to her place to watch the device. Maria, this is something amazing. Martin was in shock. It turns out that according to your idea, such an engine will squeeze out not 120 kilometers per 1 kilogram of hydrogen, but 150. That's just unbelievable. The young people went into an old room, which the girl rented as a laboratory. She showed them all the blueprints, and finally they started the engine. It works. Martin shouted in excitement. Maria, you are just a clever girl. Hydrogen from garbage and your engine is the new future. Max's hair seemed to stand on end. Everything he saw seemed impossible to him. The guy couldn't even speak in amazement. Finally, the girl turned off the engine, and they sat down at the table to discuss it all. Maria, what about the patent? Martin asked the girl. They agreed to patent it. The girl grabbed a tablet and wrote something quickly, took her hand away, and let the guest read it. It's still a problem. They don't want it. The guy read it. Who doubt it? Then their whole gas and oil industry will go to hell. But that's okay. We'll work together on this volume thing. The main thing is that it works, and even with such savings. The guys exchanged phone numbers, and agreed that Maria would come to them in Salt Lake City as soon as she could. The guys said goodbye. I should have said overwhelmed with emotion. No one had any strength left. Maria said goodbye to the guests and joyfully returned to her laboratory. The young people brought her such inspiration that one thought after another came to the girl. She sat down at her tablet and began to write everything down. In a few minutes, Maria was carried into her world, which belonged only to her. For many years now, she had finally met like-minded people. And now her invention could have a new life. That same evening, Max and Martin took the train home. Their minds were so excited by what they had seen that they were both eager to get down to business. What if we could put the whole machine together? It was to hydrogen that Martin's thoughts drifted into the future. That would be a real sensation. But at least we could build the engine, sighed his friend. And you're already going for a whole car. Maria is an incredible girl, Martin continued. You have to have such talent. Honestly, I had some gender prejudices before I met her. But like that, women have less brains than men. But Maria proved me wrong. How do you cook in a machine like that? Look at her. She's got physics, chemistry, math. She clicks the tower like nuts. Yes, Max said dreamily. I like Maria very much. She's a dream girl. And it doesn't matter that she can't tell her, pushed Martin with a friend's elbow. Don't get all romantic on me. Maria is our friend, not a date girl. Don't you like her as a girl? Max looked at his friend without understanding. She is just beautiful. Did you see her eyes? They are so blue, just like the sky. I would not refuse a girl like her, but I have a purely pragmatic interest in her, he sighed. I want us to join forces and create a damn car that will not only run on hydrogen, but that will be the most economical. Back home, the boys began their experiments with renewed vigor. Now they needed to get as much hydrogen as possible, so that then part of it could be transported somehow to Maria. Martin dreamed that after Maria had patented his engine, he would be able to get her official permission to use it in his car. The girl didn't mind. Max, on the other hand, dreamed of something else. The girl immediately fell into his soul. Maria did not interest him as a scientist, although he admired her. He liked her as a person. There seemed to be something more behind her silence. For the first time in his life, the guy could look at a girl not as an object of lust or a thing, but as a person with whom he wanted to spend his time, to be friends, to discuss pressing problems. The day after Martin and Max arrived, they were fully immersed in work. It was March, and the guys didn't need to go to the institute. Max had already written his diploma long ago. Martin sometimes typed something on the computer at night. Martin, let me give you some money. Let them do the practical part. A friend suggested it. But when you get your diploma, you don't have to write. I'll pick up some hardware myself. Boy, after all, I have to finish it. And why didn't I get into engineering? He resented me. After the guests, Maria just plowed. The girl had already written several scientific articles, constantly wrote about her work on the internet. But except for laughter and insults, no one offered anything concrete. And then these two people appeared in her life. Her mom was talking to her mother. You know, I feel like they're gonna help me. Together we can get this whole thing started. Maria, how much effort you put into all this? Her mother answered her. It's unbelievable. And it was true. After the girl stopped speaking after a severe fright, her parents immediately moved to the other side of the city, where Maria began to go to a specialized school for mute children. All her teachers were just shocked by her. After the tragic incident, the girl's mind began to work even faster. On the one hand, Jean's Maria's father was a chemist, and everything in their house was littered with rare manuals on all areas of the science. But Greg was not accepted in his time. All ideas were rejected, and he eventually began to drink. Maria, from the 5th grade, seriously began to be interested in chemistry. The girl hoped that this way she could return her father. Yes, Leonid Grigorievich read her complex theories, explained to his daughter how the universe is organized. But after she went to bed, the man put a bottle on the table. Maria's mother couldn't do anything about it. Even constant first places in the chemistry Olympiad for special children couldn't change anything. And one day Greg simply didn't wake up. For Maria, it was the strongest blow, and if not for her father's books, in which she then immersed, the girl simply went mad. Nena, Maria's mother, was very happy for her daughter. She realized that the brilliant mind of her daughter should be noticed by someone. But most of all, she wanted Maria to marry one day, have children, and find her happiness as a woman. But who would marry her? Her mother thought, if someone as dumb as she was. And where will you find a guy who loves science as much as Maria? Mostly they're all insecure, cornered. They just want to live their lives without anyone touching them. Despite the fact that Maria was on it, it was a huge problem. But thanks to her, the girl could get some money from the state. She did not need to work for this. The girl realized that if she wanted to realize her dream, she needed to fully focus on her work. That is why she could not work fully. Sometimes Maria was given an order to do some control or tests. She even tried her hand at artificial stones, which the girl grew for jewelers. After Maria graduated from the special school, she was faced with a very difficult choice. Undoubtedly, the girl had talent, and she needed to continue studying. But no university went her way. "How are we going to get her?" said the chancellor of Detroit's university in dismay. "How will she go to class?" Nina ran to all kinds of authorities, but everywhere she was rejected. Maria could not study in a regular university. The girl cried bitterly for several months, but then she pulled herself together and decided to act on her own. Maria did not want to be a theoretical scientist. She realized that in order to get somewhere, you need a practical part. The girl decided to deal with future technologies. She chose alternative fuel for her project. Maria knew for a long time that hydrogen was the most common element, and despite the complexity of the work, it was possible to produce it. Maria became interested in isotopes of hydrogen, air, and after almost 3 years, she was able to isolate pure hydrogen from it. Maria spent almost all day now in her laboratory. She wanted to prepare for her trip to Salt Lake City. The girl wanted to make some improvements to her engine. It was almost 8 o'clock when Maria realized that she was very tired. She put down all her drawings, closed her workbook. Only now she remembered that she hadn't eaten anything all day. She thought, "I have to get home quickly, or I'll starve to death. Besides, my mom already texted me that she was worried." Maria closed the door to her lab and walked towards the bus stop. The girl rented a very cheap room in the place where warehouses used to be, but the place was deserted. Maria walked forward quickly as she suddenly felt someone swooping down on her from behind and clamped her nose with something. A few seconds later, the girl lost consciousness. How heavy! A man's quiet voice was heard in the darkness. He was trying to pull a bag over Maria. At last he succeeded, and he put the girl in the car and drove her to an unknown destination. Maria didn't come to her senses the whole time. "This is where you belong." The same voice was heard, and the man began to pull the girl's body out of the car in which he had brought her. After a few minutes, some kind of door opened and Maria was carried into the room as a bundle. The man put her on a stretcher and took her somewhere. After a few minutes, he pulled into some cold room, pulled off Maria's sack, and threw the girl on the floor. "This is where you belong," he laughed. He went out and locked the door behind him. After about 20 minutes, Maria came to her senses. She could already feel the cold. The girl jumped up quickly. She had had a fear of the dark for years. In an instant, she found herself in a biology class in the back room where her classmates had locked her up for the night. Then from fear, the girl lost consciousness and lay on the floor until morning, until she was not found there. Her mother and the police searched for her all night, but the girl was nowhere to be found. They even came to the school and checked all the elementary school classrooms, but they did not go to the 3rd floor at that time. After Maria was brought to consciousness, the girl realized that she could not speak. She tried to make some sounds, but nothing worked. The doctor said that Maria would never speak again because of the severe stress. This came as a real shock to everyone. Maria began to panic. She felt her lungs start to work frantically, but she still couldn't breathe. A strange odor hit her nostrils. The girl tried to breathe somehow. She remembered her phone and reached into her pocket. She pressed the buttons, but the phone seemed to hang. The screen kept showing someone else's number. Maria was in such a state that she couldn't recognize it. The girl began to write something with trembling fingers. "Help me, please." She duplicated it in her mind. "I'm locked up somewhere. It's dark in here." Finally, the girl felt as if she had been electrocuted, and she directed the light of the screen to the room she was in. There were corpses lying on tables. In the morgue automatically wrote the girl and had a phone with horror. She began to gasp. It seemed to her that she had already died. The fear was so strong that she could not cope with it. The girl closed her eyes, but after a moment strange thoughts began to appear in her head. Was there really nothing that could be done? One by one, the thoughts appeared in her head. Yes, I'm trapped. No one can help me now. But if I can't do something from the outside, then I can do something from the inside. After that thought, it was as if the girl had some strength. She suddenly jumped to her feet and started screaming, but she couldn't do anything. Maria opened her mouth wide, but she couldn't utter a sound. Could I suddenly hit her on the head like a hammer? No. The girl heard someone's inhuman voice. No. "Let me out of here, help." A loud scream echoed throughout her brain. Maria screamed for so long until her voice went ah. After she threw away her fear, she felt better. The girl felt herself start to breathe more freely, her lungs and easily conducting air. "No," the girl said aloud. "God, who locked me in the morgue." Loudly she spoke. I began to speak again. Through tears whispered the girl. "But how can I get out of here now?" Maria looked around once more. She was uneasy, but there was no longer such wild fear and terror. She was more confused by the terrible odor and the cold. "God, I'll either freeze or die here by morning." The girl was afraid. When will I sing? Suddenly she decided so unexpectedly. And Maria began to sing. She tried to remember all the songs she knew. The powerful voice made her feel warmer, and the terrible odor stopped irritating her nostrils so much. It had been probably an hour when the girl took a break, and only now Maria noticed that her phone had been dead for a long time. In her bag, she didn't notice it anywhere. Maybe it's thieves. The girl thought to herself, "They stole my bag and then brought it here to get rid of me." But whatever it was, her phone not only hung up, but stopped working. As it always does in these complicated cases. But then, I'll sing until morning. The girl decided. So I will definitely not freeze. I imagine the state of the pathologist who enters the morgue and hears singing here. The girl laughed. He would go crazy. Maria, as if looking at herself from the outside, and could not believe that she not only survived, did not go crazy, but also retained a sense of humor. "What's happening to me?" She said out loud, "I'm trapped in a morgue among all these corpses. Of course I feel some fear, but it doesn't make me sick. I'm at peace inside. And most importantly," I started to say again what it all means. The girl was tired of standing on her feet. She tried to sit down near the wall. Maria felt that she would even fall asleep. She began to feel strongly inclined to sleep. But the girl was afraid that by morning she would be cold. "The whole story makes me laugh." She laughed. "Who would have thought it? For years doctors have been fighting over my disease. I've had so many procedures, and now I've been cured by a corpse." She couldn't calm down. Not even animals, not plants, just ordinary dead people. It's true that fear is a great fear. If someone told me about this, I'd die at the thought. That I'm not only sane or conscious, but I'm not bad. If it weren't for this cold. Maria's eyes became quite accustomed to the darkness, and she began to distinguish the bodies lying on the couch. The girl took a few steps around the room for the first time and walked around. It seemed to her that there was a warmer place near the door, and she moved there. At first, Maria pounded on the door with her fists, but then she realized that either no one could hear her, or there was no one in the morgue. The girl squatted down. She felt some coolness, but the penetrating cold, as in the beginning, the room was not here, and the corpses were lying away from her. They were all concentrated in the coldest place. Why did they do this to me? Maria began to come to her senses. Is it some kind of accident, or is it all set up? She pondered. But you don't just do things like that. So someone organized it all. But what were their motives? Maybe they want to kill me because of my invention. There have been so many accidents with famous scientists and inventors. Maybe some oil oligarchs organized it. Then why did they drag me to the morgue? No, it doesn't make sense. Then who am I interfering with? The girl couldn't understand. Maria had forgotten all about her cell phone, that she texted someone. The girl thought about being stuck in the morgue until morning. She didn't know what time it was either. I'm tired of singing, Maria said out loud. How can I pass the time? Maybe they'll bring someone in at night and I'll be discovered. And yet the girl could no longer bear the horrible odor. She stepped a little to the side and vomited. Maria felt dizzy. With all her might, she pressed herself against the door crack to try and catch some fresher air. I can do this, pounded in her head. I can take it all, whispered the pale lips. Hello, Maria. Hello, shouted Max into the receiver. But there was no answer. At first, there was complete silence, but then the distinctive sound of a blocked number was heard. God, what does all this mean? In horror, thought the guy. It could hardly be a joke. Since Maria can't speak, this text message may be the only hope of rescue for her. The young man quickly dialed his friend's number, but Martin was in the laboratory, engaged in his experiments, so he even forgot to take his phone out of his coat pocket. Called him 5 times already. What am I supposed to do now? Clutching his head, Max reasoned. I'll definitely call Detroit's police. The guy called the police and asked for someone to contact Detroit. Young man, are you kidding me? The voice on the phone said, I'm not laughing. What Detroit? What morgue? I'll make an administrative case against you now. The policeman swore and hung up. You understand, Maria can't speak. She's mute, the guy continued. But at last he got the dings and beeps, and he took his phone away from his ear. I have to do this, he said to himself and looked at his watch. I can make it in 12 hours if I go at full speed. Max quickly ran downstairs where his mother and father were sitting in the kitchen. The boy approached them with a worried look. I need to go to Detroit right away. I've got a friend in trouble. Probably, if I don't save him, he just won't survive. The son said quickly. As soon as I get there, I'll call you. And he ran out of the house. Max ran out after him. Father, what happened? He tried to stop the car, but the guy had already pulled out of the gates of the big house and sped down the deserted streets toward the highway. Just so long as she could hold out. Knocked in the temples of the guy Maria native and hold on, as if he tried to convey to the girl his thoughts. I will definitely save you. Max did not fully understand why this whole story had such a strong effect on him, but he felt very clearly inside that Maria meant much more to him than he thought. The boy was realizing some feelings that were new to him. He kept feeling that he had known Maria for a long time, but it was as if he had forgotten her. And now that she was in trouble, he remembered that. Maria, do I need you? Any thoughts in his head? God, what's happening to me? The boy said out loud, I don't understand anything, but I know one thing. I have to save Maria. Max drove in a straight line at full speed. The guy realized he could get a ticket, but he didn't care at the time. It was still in full bloom when Max's car pulled into Detroit. The guy didn't know where he should go now. He dialed 03 and called. Can you tell me where the morgue is in Detroit? He asked quickly. I have a friend locked up there. There was silence. The other end didn't know how to respond to the question. Are you trying to play a trick on me? The woman finally answered. I'll call the police now. I'll be very grateful to you for that. Max said tiredly. They refused to accept my call. Will you help me save a man? Or are you going to blame me? We have several of them. I heard a disgruntled reply. How do I know which one you want? The most unremarkable one. It was as if someone had asked through the boy. The one where a person can be easily hidden. Well, I guess a regional hospital wouldn't suit you, she reasoned. Bureau of Forensic Medicine, most likely also a center of ritual services. They usually have everything under control, except Detroit General Hospital. I don't have any other obvious options. How do you get there? The stranger asked hopefully. I just pulled into town where the big sign is. They have a morgue under the 7th building. The paramedic answered and gave Max detailed information so that he could get there. It was already light when the guy ran up to the door of the morgue. He looked at his watch. It was 8:30. He started knocking with all his might, but no one answered him. So he rushed into the emergency room and got everyone on their feet. "You're talking nonsense." The doctor on duty got angry. "Are you out of your mind? How could anyone be locked up?" And yet Max got his way. And in about 15 minutes, he opened the doors of the morgue together with the guard and the doctor. The guy entered the corridor and shouted, "Maria, you're here." The whole morgue was filled with an inhuman voice. "Maria, you'll lift all the dead." The doctor laughed hysterically. "I almost blew my hat off from your scream." But after a moment, there was a soft bang, as if something had fallen. Everyone went to the refrigerator. From there, the banging started. A minute later, the room was opened. From the doorway, a girl staggered out. "Maria," muttered her Max. "It's okay." He took her in his arms and carried her to his machine. "What a mess," the guard whispered. "What's going to happen now?" "Probably be put on trial." The doctor and the guard silently watched Max until he disappeared behind the hospital gates. "Maria, don't be afraid. Everything will be all right now," Max said. He quickly took something out of the glove compartment. "Write your address." He handed the girl a pen and some paper. "I'll take you home now, and then we'll decide together what to do." Maria worked something with trembling hands. The girl finally began to come to her senses and cried loudly. Her nerves relaxed a little and the stress started to come out. "It's all right, sweetheart," Max urged. "It's all right." He tried to calm the girl down. Maria abruptly grabbed a paper and wrote something. Max read that the girl asked to call her mother. "Hello, Nina." Quickly the guy realized. Maria is already fine. She is safe and sound. "My name is Max. I went to see her the other day with a friend about the engine from Salt Lake Satoya. Maria texted me to help her out. We'll be there soon." "Yeah, she's fine. I'll tell you all about it on the spot." Max tried to speak calmly, hearing the woman's hysterics. In a minute, they drove up to a high-rise building. There was a woman walking back and forth in front of the entrance. Maria, sobbing, ran up to the girl. "Maria, my girl, what happened to you?" "Nina, we can talk about everything at home," asked Max. "Maria has no strength. She better lie down for a while." The mother prepared for her daughter herbal tea with lemon. And the girl went to her bed. While she came to herself a little, Max told Nina Alexeyevna everything that had happened to him and who it could be. The woman looked at the guy in horror. "Max, I don't understand anything." "I don't either yet," sighed the guy. "Now Maria will come to her senses, and then we will write everything she knows." Max felt so tired that he just fell off his feet. He had forgotten all about his parents. Suddenly his phone rang. "Yes, I'm fine. I saved Maria. Someone locked her in the morgue." The son answered tiredly. "Let me call you later." "Maria who?" Shocked, questioned Mark Austin. "She was locked up in the morgue." "I don't understand anything." "Dad, please, I'll call you later." "I don't even have the energy to talk to you," begged his son Max. Maria fell asleep. The landlady came to him, "Come and you, and lay down on my bed. And then when you both wake up, we'll figure it out." The boy couldn't even resist. He just fell on the bed and fell asleep immediately. Nina settled down on the old couch. They all had hardly slept all that night, so they were completely powerless. It was probably around 2 o'clock when Max felt someone touch his hair. The guy immediately opened his eyes. Maria was sitting in front of him. "Maria, are you all right?" The guy jumped up. "Are you feeling better?" The girl smiled and nodded at him. Despite the fact that Maria had her voice back, she didn't want to tell anyone about it yet. And it wasn't that she didn't trust her mother or Max. The girl just wanted to deal with who wanted to kill her first and why. And in such a sophisticated way. Nina quickly set the table and they had lunch. After that, Maria took a piece of paper and started to write something on it. The girl described everything that had happened to her. "So you didn't see him?" Max asked. "Maybe even a glimpse of him." Maria shook her head negatively. She took a pen and wrote that she thought it was a man. "Maybe two. Judging by the fact that they brought her to the morgue, the bandits must have carried her in their arms. So let's start at the beginning," the guy suggested. "You were walking home. Somebody came up behind you and put something on your nose. A minute later, you passed out. What could it be? It's probably either. Maria wrote, "It's often used to temporarily incapacitate a person." Okay, you were sedated with ether, and then somehow you ended up in the morgue. Max continued to speculate. You wanted to make a phone call, but something happened to your phone. You only pressed one number on mine. You texted me for help. Then your phone died. No one came to see you, and you didn't see or hear from anyone. That's it. The girl nodded her head in agreement. Max and Nina looked at her in bewilderment. Maria, who could it be? Her mother asked. Do you have any idea? None. She wrote on a piece of paper, I don't know who it is or what Max stood up for. I think until we find out who did it and for what purpose. You better get out of here, get out of Detroit. Nina asked him. Max, but where? I don't have any relatives around here. We'll all go to Salt Lake City together, the guy suggested. I'll help you rent an apartment for a while, and then we'll see. Nina, do you realize this is serious? He looked at the woman who was trying to tell him something. Thank God Maria survived this time. But we can't take any more risks. The girl's mother was very afraid for her daughter's life, so she finally agreed. She and Maria packed all the necessary things, called her work, and explained that she urgently needed to leave for a few weeks. Then, everyone drove to Max's lab. Max carefully loaded the girl's invention and all the necessary documents. A statement to the police. We'll write it here, Max suggested. It's not safe to do such things here. Everyone got into the car and drove to Salt Lake City. On the way, Max took a break. Near a small town, a woman and a girl went to get water, and Max called his father. Dad, I need an apartment right away. I'm asking you, he said seriously. I'm taking Maria and her mom home. Max, what the hell is going on? The father shouted unhappily. What's with Maria, such a girlfriend of mine? Unexpectedly, the boy replied. I love her very much. You have a fiancé? Mark Austin asked in astonishment. But for some reason he didn't tell me and my mother anything. Dad, come on, please help me later. Cut the kid off. Give me money for an apartment for a couple months. I'm not bringing them home with me. All right, the man agreed. But only after you tell me everything. Max drove home slowly, making stops along the way. So they arrived in Salt Lake City early the next morning. Mark Austin sent his son an address that they could all go to together, but it would do for the first time. Took a look around the boys' one-bedroom apartment. Looks like it's got everything, so what do you got? I'll check in with you this afternoon. We'll have to go to the police and file a report. Maria approached Max, and from her eyes he realized that the girl wanted to thank him. Maria, the main thing is that you're alive, and the rest can be fixed. He looked into her glowing eyes. Max went home happy. For the first time in his life, he felt that he had done a very important thing. Max didn't feel like a hero, but he clearly realized that he was in the right place at the right time, and that made him happy. Suddenly, Max's phone rang, and Martin's phone number popped up. Would you have called me in another week? His friend said grudgingly. I almost died here, and you don't even want to know anything about me. Max, I'm sorry. I forgot my phone in the garage yesterday, Martin said guiltily. Anyway, it fell out and sat down somewhere, so I couldn't find it for a long time. What happened? Finally, he asked not me, but Maria. Quickly answered the guy. I rescued her. She's in Salt Lake City now, by the way. I brought her and her mother back from Detroit. Yes, I must have missed something important. Martin replied in shock. From now on, please elaborate. To say that the friend was completely bewildered by Max's story is to say nothing. Martin couldn't believe a word he said at first, but then he came to his senses and realized that Max had no desire to lie to him. What will happen now? Martin asked. Do you think she'll be hunted? Maybe someone wants to steal it. How should I know? Replied the friend tiredly. What normal person would think of such a thing? If they wanted to get rid of her or steal something, they probably would have done it already. But maybe it's a trick to get rid of her? The boy suggested. You know, not everyone can die from being in the morgue, Max replied. It's possible to go crazy, I guess. I don't understand his purpose at all, what he wanted to do. Well, let's say the idea was to make Maria go crazy, Martin reasoned. Then it turns out that all her designs are bullshit too. Or rather, life-threatening. But if you look at it that way, sighed the friend. Then yes, I guess, maybe. Then it turns out that Maria's invention is actually so important that in this way it can be discredited. But it seems to me that it would be easier to burn down her laboratory or kill her. God knows what they have in mind. With annoyance in his voice, replied the guy. Well, the main thing is that Maria is alive, and the rest time will tell. It was not far from Max's house, so he finished talking to his friend, promising to meet him tonight. En apa. Hi. A guy ran into the house. I'm finally home. Dad, thanks for helping me with the apartment. But now then we can talk to you, looked at his son Mark Austin unhappily. Yes, now I'm ready, replied the boy and sat down on the chair. Ask me questions. I'll answer all your questions. Don't you want to tell us anything yourself? His mother looked at him in surprise. I thought you would want to tell us your secret love story. It's not secret at all, Max said. It's just that when we went to Detroit, I met the girl. Then it turns out that all her designs are bullshit too. Or rather, life-threatening. But if you look at it that way, sighed the friend. Then yes, I guess, maybe. Then it turns out that Maria's invention is actually so important that in this way it can be discredited. But it seems to me that it would be easier to burn down her laboratory or kill her. God knows what they have in mind. With annoyance in his voice, replied the guy. Well, the main thing is that Maria is alive, and the rest time will tell. It was not far from Max's house, so he finished talking to his friend, promising to meet him tonight. En apa. Hi. A guy ran into the house. I'm finally home. Dad, thanks for helping me with the apartment. But now then we can talk to you, looked at his son Mark Austin unhappily. Yes, now I'm ready, replied the boy and sat down on the chair. Ask me questions. I'll answer all your questions. Don't you want to tell us anything yourself? His mother looked at him in surprise. I thought you would want to tell us your secret love story. It's not secret at all, Max said. It's just that when we went to Detroit, I met the girl of my dreams. I mean, almost 2 weeks ago, you just met her. And today you've already brought her and her mother to Salt Lake City. Max's father said in anger. Are you out of your mind? Dad, what's wrong with you? I love Maria. The boy crossed his arms on his chest. Have I ever said that about any girl before? No, Mark Austin was honest. But how can you get to know a person in 2 weeks? Would you look at yourself first? The guy threw a grudge. How long did you know your mom when you took her to Salt Lake City? But that's a different story, the man said. And times were different then too. But why not? I'll even remind you, exactly 3 days, the son persisted. And what, you don't live well with your mom? No. Again, Max's dad had to admit it. We're talking about you now, not us. And what, in fact, what is the difference? The boy wouldn't give up. I love Maria, and she will be my wife. But you don't know her at all. Nickel intervened. You could at least ask us first, Mom, am I going to live with her? Not you. Coldly looked at the woman's son. So what do you care? But the problem is at least what you're going to feed her. Are you sitting on my neck yourself? Mark Austin threw down the ultimate trump card. And now you want me to feed your Maria? No, you don't have to feed Maria. She's a genius. Maria is a scientist, and she has. I hope I don't have to explain to you that the polyethylene that's lying under our feet is an organic substance. The son said arrogantly. That's enough. The man grabbed his head. I've had enough of your hydrogen. I hope so. Do you remember that you gave your word that you would work for me after your diploma? So I'm looking forward to seeing you. I remember. Max replied grudgingly. You don't even let me forget about it. That's fine. Mark Austin rubbed his hands together. On this positive note, I propose to end our conversation. I will think about your Maria, he added and left the hall. Mania, at least tell him. I beg you. Looked at the woman's son. Maria is a very nice girl. Max, I asked you to finish the institute first, and then do what you want. His mother didn't listen to him. That's what the boy always thought. It's always profitable to be bad. But when you do noble deeds, they make you look like a real fool. What? They'd rather I drink and hang out in nightclubs. They don't know what they want from me. The guy was not happy. He went to his room. He wanted to get some sleep. After lunch, he was going to pick up Maria and go with her to Martin's garage. Besides, he had to take the instruments there. The girl wanted to continue her work, and Max didn't want to leave her alone for too long. I'm going to marry Maria anyway, he thought before. Falling asleep. It's all right, I can work on my own. And I don't need your money. Soon we'll have our own car and I'll have my own money. Maria. So Alex jumped out of bed when his guests left. It's been a long time since I've seen her. Nothing. I'll fix that, the guy whispered under his nose, closing the front door on the key. He quickly ran downstairs, and since he had an advantage over his guests, he could follow them quietly. What are you climbing up to here? The cousin was indignant, watching his cousin and his friend. I've been here with you for almost 3 hours. Finally, the boys turned the other way and went somewhere. After half an hour, they headed towards a cafe. They were met by a beautiful girl. Here is Maria, lost from joy hands Alex. But hello, very glad to see you again. After Maria came to herself, the girl began to be questioned by teachers and a psychologist about who locked her in the back room with the skeleton. The schoolgirl immediately pointed at Alex and William. The latter stood silently, lowered his head, and the former used anything to avoid admitting anything. What's it got to do with me? You ask William. Seriously answered the boy. It was like this. Maria comes up to us and says rumor has it that I'm the cowardliest in the class. But I'm not. Would you like me to prove it to you? I could spend all night with a skeleton. Will and I started to talk her into letting Maria go home. We took our backpacks and left. We never saw her again that day. Then why were both doors to both the back room and the classroom locked? The principal looked at him sternly. How do I know? Alex was indignant. Did you find the keys from me? You can ask your mother or father that we don't have them at home and never had them. After talking to his parents, the principal decided to remove Alex from the school. Drunken parents tried to wave their hands in protest, but the head of the school did not change his decision. Then Lyudmila decided to send her son to his mother. She, of course, was ungodly drunk, but the girl realized that she had nowhere to send her son. Alex's grandmother by that time already lived alone. A year ago, she had buried her husband. Nikolay had been struggling with her drunkenness for many years, and as they say, had worn himself out. He tried to breathe once, but couldn't. His heart stopped. The doctors said that a blood clot had broken off. His grandmother in the village did not watch Sashka in any way, so the boy began to suppress the last signs of empathy in himself by all means. At first, he shot birds with a slingshot. His favorite occupation was in the evening deadfall, sparrow counting. As Alex grew up, so did his amusements dying cats and dogs caught by the boy in traps, hanging by the throat on trees' neighbors' ducks, overflights and gasoline, and burned chickens and cats is a small part of the favorite activities of the boy, from which he enjoyed. But from time to time, he still remembered that because of some Maria, he had been deprived of normal living conditions. Of course, it was hard in Detroit, but at least there was food at home. In the village, my grandmother drank all the time. She didn't grow or cook anything. Alex quickly learned to steal money, but the neighbors began to suspect and complain about him. So the boy began to blame only one person for all his failures. Maria, in his fantasies, he always imagined her writhing in pain, screaming, crying, and calling for help. When Alex was bad, he always imagined it. Such pictures immediately lifted his mood. Time passed, and the boy Alex turned into a guy. He hardly finished 9 grades and lived his own life for a long time. Sometimes his mother came to the village. When Alex turned 17, his grandmother died. His mother did not want to take him to the city, even though he asked, no matter how much of a brute he was. But Alex realized that he could not survive without a job. Naturally, any education was out of the question. With age, Alex's hatred for Maria grew into hatred for his grandmother, mother, and all women. He simply despised them all. The boy dried his first glass of vodka when he was 11 years old. Then he lay unconscious in the barn for almost 24 hours after his grandmother died. He began to slowly adopt the family traditions. The kid sold everything he could get his hands on, He didn't work anywhere. Sometimes he was hired in the villages for some physical labor, when he had to carry something or dig. He didn't really want to learn anything. Neighbors tried to avoid him, despite the fact that Alex grew up and did not mock animals so much. He still showed his animal grin from time to time. Local people were afraid of him, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they learned that he was going to sell his grandmother's house and go to the city. When the boy was 22, a district officer came to him and told him that his mother and father had died. They participated in a joint drinking party in private sectors, and by morning they had all burned to death. Alex dreamed of selling his house for more money, but no one wanted to take it even for a penny. The house was old, it was a mess, and it had a reputation for being a mess. Finally, someone bought the house for very little money. It was just enough for a few months in town. And then there was the question of work. Alex worked as a loader, tried himself at the factory, but he did not want to work hard. One day, the guy saw an ad in the newspaper there in the morgue required an orderly. That would be interesting, laughed the guy. That's the kind of thing I like. He rubbed his hands together happily. So Alex began to work in the morgue. The doctor did not bother him much. And the work is not to say that it was difficult, no harder than pulling sacks. The guy thought after he started working there. Finally, Max and his friend left the cafe. Maria followed them. Alex continued to follow all three of them. So Maria has made it to the top, he whispered angrily. I've suffered all my life because of her, and she doesn't know any problems. That's okay, I'll get you back to your seat in no time. The plan flashed in Alex's head. As soon as Alex found out where Maria's lad was, his business was done and he was gone. From that day forward, the boy was working out his plan for revenge. I'll see what a genius you are. Alex laughed hysterically. Pour yourself more and more glasses. We'll see how you'll sing. If the skeleton made you speechless, I can't imagine what will happen to you. His laughter echoed through the apartment from the corpses. For almost a week, Alex had been imagining in his mind how Maria would be tortured in the morgue. He especially liked the ending. Maria, from fear with her hands, tries to tear her veins and leaves bloody marks on the wall. Then she senselessly falls to the floor and dies. 10 days later, Alex had everything ready. He waited outside the loud car all day. 3 months ago, he managed to buy an old car, which he now used to get to work. Putting Maria to sleep was no problem for him. The pathologist he worked with had told him everything in detail. After Alex had locked Maria in the morgue's refrigerator, he had discovered her bag in the back seat. Oh shit, cussed the guy. What am I going to do with it? Better throw it away so as not to attract attention. On the way home, he pelted the bag with rocks and threw it into the river. He made sure it didn't float up and, satisfied, drove home. All night, Alex could not sleep from the transportation of judgment. He felt so good. Pictures of Maria's suffering kept popping up in his head. A bottle of vodka helped him with that, and Alex's imagination went downhill with terrible force. Alex had 2 days so he could savor his victory. He had the weekend off. The next day, the guy kept waiting for a call to let him know what had happened at the morgue. But the phone was silent. Alex went to work. It's quiet again. Andrew, how's it going without me? Did everything go okay? With curiosity, he asked the pathologist. Yes, Alex, everything is fine. As always, calmly replied the doctor. To my great joy, there was no one at the weekend, so I was also resting on Sunday. The doctor and the guard who helped Max open the morgue agreed not to tell anyone about the incident. If there will be police to look for, then you and I will tell, suggested the doctor on duty. And if he took the girl and that's it. Why should we get involved in all this? Alex's brain was exploding. He checked the refrigerator several times. He found nothing suspicious there. The orderly was not himself that day. Alex, are you sick? The doctor asked him. Are you not feeling well? You are all white as a wall. I did not understand the question. Alex, no, yes, tried to return him to reality. But then go home, suggested Andrew. It's okay, I'll manage without you. Alex returned home. He felt very dizzy. He lay down and tried to figure out what had happened. Maybe someone let her out, he thought. Then why haven't they said anything about it yet? It's a hell of a thing. But if the paper had died a long time ago, there'd be police at the morgue. It was as if she vanished, his head exploded. Maybe she's a witch? An unclean force? Her corpses helped her escape. Everything was becoming delusional. His thoughts were becoming delusional. The guy tried to come back to reality, but something was pulling him back again. He felt his temperature rising. The delirium started. He was thrashing around in his bed, all the time yelling something, "Maria, where did you call?" Did he call for someone? I didn't kill her. Help, help, skeleton. Don't touch me, Mom. The corpses sounded through the apartment, unconnected to his words. It had been 2 weeks since Maria had filed a police report, but the case had turned out to be so convoluted that no one could still tell her anything. The girl lived in a rented apartment with her mother and worked in Martin's garage. Max was there all day long, too. Max got a call from his father one day. "I can't talk to you for days." "Where are you?" "I'm in the lab," he answered quickly. "I'm sorry, I can't talk to you right now. We have an experiment to finish." "All right," Mark Austin got angry. "Where is the location of your damn lab, Maximu?" Quickly answered and hung up. He sat as a secretary and had to write down all the statements. An hour later, someone knocked on the garage door. Dad was puzzled and said, "Son, what are you doing here?" "Sorry, but this is a work environment. I just came to see what my son was doing." The man said loudly. "Mark Austin, come in," Martin greeted the guest. "This is Maria, so to speak, our brain. And Max and I are just insects compared to her." "But hello, Maria." The man approached the girl. "I finally met you." Maria smiled and said nothing. The girl looked at Max's father with happy eyes. "And Maria can't speak," whispered his son in his ear. "She is mute against the background of childhood trauma." "Ah, that's what it is." Mark Austin sighed. "It's all clear to me now, but I won't disturb you." He turned and headed for the exit. "This is just what we need." The man resented him all the way. Not only did he not know where he had brought her from, but she couldn't talk. In the evening, Mark Austin called everyone to the council. He was serious about discussing his fiancée with Max. Can't speak Nicole opened her mouth in surprise. "Maria mute." "So what?" objected the son. "Does it matter that she can't speak? How are you going to communicate with her? The father didn't give up, and how are we going to talk to her?" "Well, I am communicating with her now, and very well." Max didn't give up his position, but it was too much. Mother protested. "I'm asking you to come to your senses." "All right," the son got up from his chair. "If you don't like Maria, then I won't live with you." He defiantly began to gather his things. "Max, are you serious?" Nicole said in shock. "And where will you live then?" "Well, with Maria and her mom," dryly answered the guy. "And when we collect the car, we will have our own money. Maria and I will live on it." That's how the father got up, and he thought about how we will look in people's eyes. "I'm a respected man in town. You're causing me so much trouble with your Maria." "Well, if it makes you feel better, you can disown me." "I'll take it, and I don't need your publishing house." "That's enough." The father shouted at the top of his lungs. "You're not going anywhere. But after the wedding, live with your Maria wherever you want." Nina had long ago realized that something was going on between her daughter and Max. She liked the guy, and it was obvious how he looked after Maria. Almost 2 months passed and Max couldn't take it anymore. He talked to Maria. The girl, very much embarrassed, took a pen and a piece of paper and wrote something on it. Yes, Max read, and with all his might he lifted his beloved in his arms. "Maria, I love you so much." Martin was very happy for his friend. He realized that with a calm Maria, Max would learn to control his emotions and would achieve great success in life. "Son, but maybe you should have defended your diploma first." Nicole begged her son. "But your Maria is not going anywhere. You've only known her for a few months." Mom sternly looked at her son. "At the end of May, Maria and I will be married. I will not change my decision." 2 weeks before the ceremony, Maria and her mother went home. The police called them, but the girl asked her mother not to say anything for the time being. "We found the man who locked your daughter in the morgue," the policeman said over the phone. Maria looked at her mother in horror. On the one hand, The girl very much wanted to know why they had done this to her. On the other, she had fear, perhaps due to Max or her inner strength. But the girl quickly forgot about the incident at the morgue as she left Detroit. After the police station, Maria and Nina were driving home in shock. They still couldn't believe what they had heard. The girl had wanted to tell everyone before the wedding that her speech had come back to her. But now she didn't know what to do. She loved Max, undoubtedly. But such intertwined destinies were very difficult for the mind to comprehend. Maria fell into a depression. "Maria, what are you doing?" Max asked her when she returned from Detroit. "You do not want to marry me?" "Max, I love you very much. It's not about you. I'm just really worried," she texted her lover. "Everything's gonna be okay." Her boyfriend hugged her and kissed her. "I won't let anyone hurt you again. I'm sure the police will call us soon and tell us that they found this criminal." "I feel it too," Maria wrote and looked intently into Max's eyes. Her gaze was full of love and tenderness. Max's parents hoped to the last moment that their son would come to his senses and give up this wedding. "Mark, I don't want him to marry Maria," the wife protested. "Well, if she had at least spoken. But it's such a shame, yes," only replied her husband. "What can we do? I'm not ready to lose Max for this. Let him have no bread. Maybe this will sober him up." If Mark Austin at least reasoned about his reputation, Nicole could not even say how she had such a strong dislike for Maria. The woman absolutely did not want her. The day of the wedding came, and Max's parents were going to it like hard labor. Mark Austin had to invite some very important people. Everything was going well. After the registration, everyone went to the restaurant. One by one, the guests began to express their congratulations and wishes. Finally, Nicole couldn't stand it and took the microphone in her hands. "Dear friends, we are very grateful to all of you." With annoyance in her voice, she said, "But unfortunately, the bride cannot thank you personally. Maria is not speaking. Please excuse us." On the hall passed dissatisfied at the flow here and there. Mockery, reproaches, and caustic voices began to be heard. Maria could not stand it and got up from her table. The girl, to everyone's surprise, took the microphone in her hands. "Dear friends," the bride began, "it's true that I have not been able to speak for many years. And only one tragic and ridiculous accident gave me back my voice. And if Nicole had not brought up the subject, no one would have known that she had an indirect relation to my mother." Everyone, including Max, opened their mouths in surprise. The groom's mother was about to lash out at her future daughter-in-law, but Maria beat her to it. "When I was in the 4th grade, I was locked in the back of the biology classroom with a skeleton 2 classmates. I lost consciousness from fear. And when I came to my senses, I couldn't speak anymore. It affected the rest of my life. I couldn't go to a normal school anymore. And the worst thing for me was that I couldn't enter the institute I had dreamed of for so many years. But I didn't give up. I did science myself, and after a while I began to realize that my knowledge is much deeper than that of most university teachers. I began to deal with the technologies of the future not for myself, but for those who will come after us. And a few months ago, I was sedated and kidnapped when I was returning home from my laboratory. When I came to, I found myself in a morgue. For the first minute, I thought I was going to go crazy. I started to choke from a panic attack, but then it was like something lit up inside me. And I decided that no matter what, I was going to live. And I heard myself screaming at the top of my lungs. My voice came back. I'd spent most of the night singing in the morgue, but no one could hear me. I somehow managed to fall asleep in the morning, leaning against the refrigerator door. It was a little warmer there, and the smell of corpses didn't make me nauseous as much. My beloved Max had found me. But the strangest thing in this whole story is who did all this and why. The bride stopped and looked around at everyone present. "His name is Alex. He is my husband's cousin and Nicole's nephew. He is the one who locked me in the school with the skeleton. He's the one who brought me to the morgue to die. What did Max jump? Maria didn't tell me everything for some reason. I found out a few weeks before our wedding," the bride replied. "Unfortunately, when you went to see him, he recognized me. Alex followed you to see where I lived. He also knew where my lab was located." Nicole stood a pale woman, realizing that her nephew could have done this. She knew the story from her sister. Lucy had called her one day. She was sobbing that because of some girl, she now had to send her son to his mother. Naturally, the girl was drunk, and Nickel didn't believe her at the time. "I'll kill him." Jumped out of the table, Max. "Why did he do that? You bastard, I wouldn't let you do that," Maria said. And besides, God had already punished him. He went crazy and died a few weeks later. The police suggest that he saw me as the cause of all his problems in life. A quiet, gifted girl who drove him crazy, but whom he didn't love, but hated with all his being. Mark Austin approached his wife Nicole, unable to contain her emotions. She cried loudly, "Well, you cannot be responsible for him or for your sister," stroked her on the head husband. "That's the end of your family's story. Nicole, let go. All of it. We need to move on." The woman came to her senses and approached Maria, where her mother was crying. "Maria, forgive me, please." Her mother-in-law rushed to her. "I didn't want you so much, but why couldn't I understand? I see now that Alex was my only link to my family. I intuitively supported him over you. My girl, I'm sorry, Nicole, it's not your fault." Her fiancé hugged her and sobbed. "Martin, I hope you didn't say anything to them." Mark Austin was worried. Maria has such an intuition that it's as if she knows everything in advance. Mark Austin, I'm sure that none of them guessed anything. His son's friend reassured him. The two cautiously jumped out of the publisher's office and headed toward a large bookstore with a huge conference room. Reporters, television, and some interested businessmen had already gathered there. "We're going to make some noise in Salt Lake City." Martin was rubbing his hands together. "Mark Austin, I'm going after them." An hour later, Martin's car turned towards the center. Maria and Max, tired from the lab, were on their way home. "Martin, where are we going?" Max asked him in bewilderment. "Do you need to go to the city center?" "Yes," the guy smiled enigmatically. "We're going to a place right now." "Max, but it's very urgent." The guys got out of the car and headed towards some hall. There were a lot of people standing there. "Martin, are the reporters shocked?" Maria asked. She wanted to ask something else, but Mark Austin ran up to her. "Maria, hurry up." He grabbed the girl's hand and ran with her into the depths. "I don't know what's going on here." Max was looking around. "Did they come to film us?" A friend guessed. Martin didn't answer anything. He just shouted Max forward. And he found himself in the center of the hall. "Dear friends," a young girl with a microphone appeared from somewhere. "Today is a historic day. We can equate it with the day Nikola Tesla presented his motor. And back then, it was a miracle. It was the first time in history that alternating current could be harnessed. Today, we want to introduce you to the heroes of our time. And as you may have noticed, among them is Maria. She's not a secretary or a lab cleaner. She is the most important brain who has created about 10 significant inventions. Today, we want to introduce you to our altruists closer and tell you what the guys have done to ensure a better future for all of us. We are sure that after our story, after everything we have heard, many people will realize that this is where we should invest our energy and money. New technologies will bring prosperity to our country, especially when not only men, but also women work on them.
Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
There was a quiet knock in the night. Camille rushed fearfully to the window, squinted her nearsighted eyes, peering into the darkness, but could see nothing, and asked in a trembling voice, "Who's there?" "Open up," she heard outside. "It's Michael Mansfield," cried the landlady, who recognized her husband's voice. "You're back." She ran out onto the veranda, and a moment later let in her daughter and a man with sunken and tired eyes. It took Camille a good hard look to recognize her husband. She rushed toward him with unbridled joy, and he turned away and said, "I'm dirty. We must wash, then we'll rejoice together. Now the water is warm on the stove. Maybe you should eat first." The woman glowed, casting her eyes on the long-awaited man. "I'll eat only a little. Don't feed me too much. I haven't had a crumb in my mouth for a week." Michael threw off his jacket, hung it on a hook by the door with the cloth of his hand. "Where have you been, Michael? It's been so long. At least you wrote, didn't you?" Camille asked with reproach in her voice. "I couldn't. I'll tell you everything afterwards. We didn't know what to think. My sister had already mourned you so many times as if you were dead. And I believed you were alive, so I went out. But all sorts of things crossed our minds. We thought maybe you'd been murdered or something. Good for you for not burying me before my time. And you didn't get married. How's Ethan sleeping?" "He's in town for work. He's got a good job now," his wife said with quiet joy. Michael sat down at the table, drank a cup of milk and bread, and said enough. "Camille, pour me some water and get the laundry ready. I can rub your back," the woman offered. "Don't," Michael replied categorically. His eyes seemed alien. "Go to bed. I'll sleep on the couch." "What is this?" Camille sighed heavily. "A bed. Nothing. The main thing is that I'm back to live again. Sleep." There was silence in the house. Camille lay in bed and closed her eyes. She remembered her younger years, hot meetings with her husband, when they both treated each other with tenderness. Why was he now so alien and indifferent? Is there nothing left of their love? Now he is a stranger around and not underfoot. What to do? How to live? What to say to him to make him realize that it is impossible for her to live without his love, tenderness, affection? At least say a nice word. "Christina, are you asleep?" Camille asked her sister. "I'm awake. Where do you think he's been all this time?" "I think he's been hiding. I think he's been hiding. I guess that's his fate. What's next? How should I know? Hurry up. I have to get up early tomorrow." "At least he hugged me, kissed me, said affectionate words," said sadly. "I thought you were a woman. Let him do what he wants. There's his son. We have a family. Maybe she'll come back to reason in time. She'll feel a man in her." The door creaked open. Michael came in, lay down on the couch, and after a few minutes his measured breathing was heard. Asleep. Lovingly thought Camille let him rest. He came back. We're all together at last. This is a great happiness. The next day, when the son Ethan learned that his father had returned, did not even talk to him, glumly gathered himself, and roughly whispered so that his mother did not hear. "Zekum do not intend to communicate. You can go wherever you want. If you stay, I'll go myself. I don't like being in a house with a criminal. Are you going to work?" the mother asked. "I'm on my way," replied the son. He looked angrily at his father and ran out the door. "He's grown up," said the father. Pain sparkled in his eyes. He took a deep breath and slumped his shoulders. "Growing up, thank God," Camille replied. "Where on earth have you been?" asked the wife. "On a job, on a construction site. And then it so happened that the owner refused to pay. Hired some thug to deal with us quietly with the laborers. I ran away at night, left everything behind, walked through the woods to get home. So I didn't write anything. Everything was left there quickly." Michael told a story he made up. It was a lie. He had served 5 years in the colony, sacrificing himself for his son. Now he escaped when exhausted by the heavy regime and beatings, pretended to be sick, won a place in the prison hospital, and from there he cheated. He made a daring escape. At night while the convoy dozed off. 5 years ago, he told the family to move to the country to his wife's sister Christina, explained himself vaguely. He sold his apartment in the city for debt. Work problems, and he needed to get away for a while. Did he actually pay whoever he needed to pay with the money from the apartment? Hired a lawyer to keep the family from knowing about the accident. That wasn't easy. Investigators insisted on questioning his wife and son. Even with money, Michael Mansfield barely managed to keep his family from being tortured by the investigation. He couldn't buy himself out of jail time, but he saved his wife and son from a terrible blow. For how long? No place to live. He came home like a beaten dog when he felt sorry for his family. And now what? Life in prison had turned Michael into a cruel, hard man. He already regretted that he didn't tell his wife everything at once and sacrificed his son. And all for what? Here's the son, now he turns his nose up. He didn't appreciate his father's deed. So what was it all for then? Turning away from his wife, Michael sat down at the table, put his hands on his head, and remembered the terrible day of the crime. The happy family life in town was marked by Ethan's 16th birthday. Michael fulfilled his son's wish by putting him behind the wheel of his old Niva. Ethan waved off enrollment in a driving school, promising his father not to take the car. And if he did drive it, then only together outside the city, where field roads are almost devoid of traffic. His son's passion for driving awakened with furious force. Against his wishes, his father enrolled Ethan in the best of the city's driving schools, but all for nothing. One day crossed all the family's aspirations and separated Michael from his family for years to come. The son took the car keys from his father's jacket late at night in Thane, sat behind the wheel, deciding to take an unauthorized ride through the city streets. At an intersection, a traffic light was stirring with a yellow light. A woman with a stroller was hurriedly stepping across the crosswalk. Ethan didn't even have time to slow down. He didn't look at the road for the running lights. Mommy realized too late that the approaching car was not going to brake forcefully and pushed the stroller away from herself. She herself was hit, fell on the hood. The car hit and flew off for a couple of meters in the ditch. The child in the stroller was orphaned in an instant, but the boy did not immediately realize what had happened. He was horrified when he heard a bang. Too late, when he saw the obstacle in the road. And then he just stepped on the gas. Other drivers immediately slowed down, jumped out of their cars before they could save the baby, got the license plate number of the perpetrator. The son drove home, put the car back where it was, didn't say anything to his father. Michael learned about the accident the next morning, when the son had already left for school and the wife to work. There was a knock on the door. Entered the investigator, a strict inspector and an investigator of the prosecutor's office. They introduced themselves as Michael. Your car was used in a hit-and-run collision with Citizen Smith. The victim died at the scene. You are detained on suspicion of murder and failure to render aid to the victim. How drunk Michael perceived what was going on. Got himself together, fumbled for his keys. The car was parked there on the hood with traces of the collision and bloodstains. All of this was an unthinkable, impossible event. A painful thought crossed out all existence before and after. Son. From then on, the investigation began. Quickly, however transformed. Witnesses were confused in their testimony. They said they couldn't see the driver's face in the headlights. One of them claimed it was a younger man behind the wheel. Taking the blame for his son, Michael got 10 years in a maximum security penal colony. His life in custody did not immediately go well. After learning about the crime, the man was beaten to a pulp on the first day. Long unbearable 5 years passed in a gloomy fog, which left dark misfires on the heart. After the final beating, Michael refused to get up. He was dragged to the hospital, left without much obstruction, thinking that the prisoner was already at death's door, and not today, so tomorrow he would give up. Having gained strength, having thoroughly studied the plan of the area, the man made an escape. He reached his family on foot, longing to live a little, to see his family and son. But it hurts in his chest to lie to his wife. He can't bear to tell her himself, or to wait for the police. Still, at least I get a little bit of freedom. My son doesn't need me. So now an honest man, a loving father, will have to bear the cross of imprisonment. At that time, his wife gave a voice to distract him from his bad thoughts. Poor you, Camille moaned. Maybe you should hide. I'm tired of hiding. Let it be what it will be. I will live as I can, calmly replied Michael. The quiet life didn't last long. 2 weeks later, 2 men in civilian clothes came for him. A police officer and an unfamiliar investigator from the city. Michael's eyes ran helplessly, as if looking for salvation. But there was nowhere to hide. Hello, Captain Justice Benjamin from the maternity ward. Well, tell us about yourself, hero. What is there to tell? You know everything. We know everything. but not everything. Who you really are is a fugitive criminal, Michael. Article 264. Camille gasped, till she woke up. She slumped to the floor and was as still as if she hadn't lived. Michael jumped up to his wife, screamed as loud as he could, yelling for an ambulance. He never got the chance that day. Michael was taken away to say goodbye to his wife, a fugitive. A new trial and a new sentence were looming. The man shouldered the salty jacket in which he had returned from his escape. He thought bitterly that he had run away for nothing. Now anyone could accuse his family of being related to a criminal. His son would get in trouble at work. Besides, Ethan didn't repent at all, as if he didn't bring trouble to the family. What kind of man has he raised? He had no remorse or conscience. It was bitter to realize that an unworthy man had grown up. What was going to happen that would change Ethan? It was hard to think about it, to accept the bleak canvas of hopelessness, glimpsed in the future of unbroken tunnels. Camille came to when Michael had already been taken away. She opened her eyes to see a white cloth of medical gowns in front of her. "Camille, get ready for the hospital," one of the attendants said insistently, in a high-pitched voice almost to you. "No, I don't need to. It's all right now. I'll leave on my own. I'm lying down. You're refusing hospitalization. And for nothing. Pressure attacks long ago, you tired," insisted the doctor, wiping drops of sweat from her forehead. "There was nothing. It's from excitement. Grief in my family is barely audible," whispered the hostess, huffed, looking at the uninvited guests. "Sign here," slipped her a piece of paper, poking her finger into the edge and remembering the pen. Soon silence reigned in the house of sickness. Our hearts clenched, a buzzing in her head as if she hadn't slept. For days the world blurred with hopelessness. She wondered what she would say to her son when he returned. She felt sorry for both herself and Michael. Why such an incomprehensible and cruel fate? She dreamed so much to live near her husband, to take care of him, to create a family together. But here, they were next to each other, and happiness bypasses them. Some people and events constantly radiate them. Camille wiped her tears, went out into the yard, and looked around. A light fog rolled through the village. The morning was gloomy, as if the earth had frozen in a heavy, foreboding sense of something terrible. Camille walked along the road under an old lime tree. "When I live," I asked myself, "I'll die alone, without warmth or affection." Walk around the yard. Harsh Camille a little shook curly short hair and thought already more firmly, a little withdrawn from the first shock. "All misfortunes come to an end one day, and so will my misfortunes. If only Michael would bear it, explain himself, write me a letter." What really happened? She had little faith in his watchwork, even when he told her not to wait for him, to live her own life. How blind she'd been, not asking about her husband, not looking for him, as if in a fog. All those years she lived with her son first after his father disappeared. He shut down. He didn't say anything to his mother and left the house for long periods of time. 6 months later, silence. The son began to move away from his painful state, caused, as it seemed to the mother, by the fact that the father abandoned them. And then everything got better. In an instant, the boy came to life, enrolled in a technical school, became an engineer, and got a good place in the city. All this time, Ethan refused to speak or remember his father. Did he really know? The mother grievingly pondered over her son, determined to speak to him frankly when she arrived. But Ethan did not return that day, nor did he come home for the next week, until Camille herself went to see him at work in the city. Matusha turned softly. She to him, "I'm not going to say anything. I won't ask you anything. You'll share it with me as soon as you can, and come home. It's not the same without a man in the house. No one to help. My father's gone. It's not like I rented a place in town. It's easier for me. But if you need help at home, I'll come. But I don't want to deal with a family of criminals. If they find out at work, they'll kick me out. How can you?" My mother exclaimed in amazement and shook her head reproachfully. Anything could have happened. Without knowing, How can you accuse a person? He may not be guilty of anything. It's just the way things are. In any case, stay. Does it hurt me that you've turned your back on your family?" The son didn't say anything. Something subtly bitter flashed in his eyes. He rose abruptly and ran away from his mother. Camille sighed heavily and started on her way back. When she got back to the village, she walked along the path thoughtfully and did not notice where the police officer William suddenly appeared in front of her. He sat down on his motorcycle, looked down at Camille, and said, "You may not go down that road again. Soon everyone will know that you are the wife of a criminal. I'll tell the people all about you. Just think of the times we live in. Anything can happen. Ethan, we don't know if he's guilty yet. How could he not be guilty? He killed a young mother to death. Drunken beater almost ran over a baby. I checked with the investigator. Your husband left like that. Left a woman to die. Couldn't you have saved her? You better run." "Camille, I won't stand for it. 5 years a widower's been looking for your fucking family. To get rid of you. You're unlucky. The man's a tough one. He's gonna avenge his wife. He's gonna kill you or your little boy. William, did you know how to do that? What do you look like? Think about it. What's the use of rehashing the past? If Michael was guilty, now he's punished to the fullest." Bitter, Camille shouted, almost hysterically. Her body trembled with anger. Her heart pounded implacably. Having learned the terrible truth, the wife did not doubt her husband's innocence for a moment. He never drank. He drove carefully. He had never been in an accident in many years. All these thoughts ran through the poor woman's mind, but her eyes glittered furiously. "There's no redeeming what Michael did. One word from me, and you'll be gone. I didn't know what you were really like. You ran from your wife to me. And when I kicked you out, you became my enemy. Is that what revenge means? If you want to take revenge on me, then live in your house until you die for your sins. Don't say a word. Don't scare me with my sins. Think of your own. You won't be here much longer. Drive on by, smart ass. We'll see who outlives who." Camille proudly walked around and hurried to her house. But she realized from the last phrase, the policeman had said that she would be found soon. She had to leave. It was necessary to prepare, to collect everything necessary for herself and her son, which would come in handy on the long journey. Christina greeted her sister grudgingly. "So where are you? All the work is standing by." "What work, Christina? We're so grief-stricken. I'd better go to the Oscars." Camille shared the latest developments. They sat on a bench outside the house. They consoled each other as best they could and decided to go as far into the unknown as possible, on the condition that Christina stayed behind. It was worth it, Camille, but could Ethan be persuaded to go with them? Camille was even more worried about his fate now. Her gut told her that her son was involved in his father's business, but he was hiding it from his mother and would not share it. "To avoid getting in trouble with me, you can temporarily move in with your family. Christina Smith said we might get revenge, and he'll let us know where we live. Why are you listening to this blabbermouth? All he does is talk." "I'm a criminal's wife," Camille mumbled sadly. "And that says it all. Is it really true?" "I can't believe what I'm hearing," Christina asked. "We have to be ready for anything. You see, we're newcomers, even though we've been living here for a long time, not even registered. We could be evicted. I'm used to you. How can I be alone now? Maybe I'll ask my brother to stay with me for a while. I don't know. Why don't you go talk to him? That's my sister. Poor us," Christina exclaimed and hugged Camille. "No happiness for us." They sat and cried. I could feel the uncertainty, confusion and fear floating away with their tears. Camille got up from the bench first and quietly said, "Stop crying. We have to live. We have to work. You and I, Christina, will survive all our enemies. We've done them no harm." Camille and Ethan rode into the unknown. The son exercised until he feared retribution, determined to move for his own safety. And so the family left their settled home and farm. They traveled by freight car, having agreed with the driver so that their trail would be lost, cut off. They did not even take tickets. Camille found a seat near a high window, threw her things on the floor, comforted her son. Don't be afraid of anything. People live everywhere. I don't mind. I'm even interested, Ethan answered, quietly rejoicing that he would no longer see his hated boss, would no longer go to work and perform routine tasks. Where are we going? I don't know. Son, you can look where there are shifts. You will find your specialty everywhere, and I can be a janitor, and we can come back. It'll be a while. Ethan kept watching the fields and forests outside the window. For the first time, he heard the names of stations and towns, and they kept driving forward as the towns and scenery changed. Having hastily looked through the list of vacancies, they even contacted the employer. They got the go-ahead, so they decided to find at the nearest station to change to Lazarev, where they promised work and lodging. On hitchhiking cars, we have already reached the village, where people lived in small houses. One of them was given to Camille Ethan. The boy frowned as he looked at the wilderness they had been forced into by fate. Nearby stretched a canal of green, undrinkable water. Along it grew steep trees, probably poplars. I was comforted by the fact that in this godforsaken settlement, there were workers from different parts of the country, friendly, helpful, and people ready to help the newcomers. These people willingly told a little about their lives, about how hard they managed to adapt. This is where we are going to live, Camille said, looking around at the accommodation they had been given. How long do we have to put up with this? Ethan was indignant. He was ready to go back. But then he'd have to betray his mother. Our father's still got about 7 years left on his sentence. I got the address on my last date with him before he left. He wasn't much of a talker himself. Didn't even want to meet. 7 years, my son asked in surprise. His whole body shuddered, his face affirmed, as if it had become a fireplace. So he and I are doing time together. What are you saying, son? Maybe they'll release us sooner. Then we can come back sooner. Ethan was quickly put to work. The work was not dusty. They didn't ask for much. The pay was 5 times higher than his old job. The guy was excited and decided to earn money for an apartment, move closer to the sea, and then live in his own pleasure. Camille also started working. The woman did not refuse to do anything. She was used to hard work, but the move and the climate affected her health. One day she felt a pain in her neck, and when she felt a small band, which grew 3 days later. A fever rose. Camille was frightened. What if something happened to her? How would her son be left alone? Who would look after him and care for him? A local doctor was called in. A man with a pleasant face and a soft voice, not yet old, black hair, came in and examined the patient and said that it was carbonic anemia, most likely caused by the change of climate. He applied some ointment either for it or for simple human attention. Camille felt better. She almost cried. For the first time she felt cared for. This handsome, manly man had stirred her hitherto dormant heart. Here's the thing. Camille, don't worry, said the doctor. I'll cure you of this ailment. I've had to deal with other illnesses, and I'll make sure you don't do any more hard work. What am I supposed to do? You're gonna clean my office. I'll get you a job as a nurse. It's not much, but it's still a good salary. Thank you very much, Liam. Feel better. I'll come back tomorrow to check on you. The doctor visited Camille for a week, until the tumor finally went away. I'll give you 3 more days to recover, and you'll start your new job on Monday. You and I will have plenty. Thank you, Liam. You brought me back from the dead. You're welcome. It's my duty. I met your son. He's a wonderful boy, well-mannered. I think we'll be friends. He's different. Sometimes, you see, he grows up without a father. Where's the father sitting? He lowered his eyes in shame. Camille, and then she added, I've written to him, but we haven't heard from him. I hope he's alive. What's he in for? The doctor asked. Then he realized, it's none of my business. Camille sighed softly and said, "Poor people suffer for no reason. It's not his fault, but he's hiding something. He took it all on himself." In these moments, she was still pushing away from herself the terrible thoughts concerning the truth of that hit and run. But in her mind, there were still images of insight, of the true state of affairs. "I look forward to seeing you at work," Liam went out. And Camille thought happily that the world was not without good people, but that they would get by in the middle of nowhere. The time would come, they'd come home, even if they had to live here for a few years. The woman remembered her garden, orphaned and home, and cried quietly with longing and sadness. Camille went to work until lunchtime washing. She cleaned the floors of Dr. Silverstav's office, and then in the evening she washed medical dishes. Sterilize it one day on New Year's Eve. The doctor was late at work, sat writing at his desk, and prevented Camille, who was in a hurry to get home, because she wanted to celebrate the holiday with her son and cook him something tasty for dinner. "What is it, Liam, that you've earned so much? All the people are getting ready to celebrate, and you haven't gotten off work." "It's nice to be with you, Camille. I don't want to go home. Let's celebrate New Year's Eve together." The man suddenly proposed and looked intently into the eyes of the former woman. "I have some wine here. I have some candy, and a melon I bought at the market when I went downtown." The doctor took a bottle of wine out of the cupboard and invited Camille. "Put your rags aside. Sit down at the table." The woman wiped her hands while stroking her curly hair and quietly sat down to the table. The man kept looking at the guest with tenderness, filled a glass with wine. "Put it down. Let's drink to the new year, my dear. May it bring us happiness, good health, and all the best in our lives." "May it be so. Bless you, Liam," I answered. Raised the glasses. We clinked glasses. "You're just a heroic woman." Suddenly, a man confessed, "And very beautiful." "What are you saying?" "I'm the wife of a criminal. Such a stigma, which will not be washed away for the rest of my life." The woman said sadly, sighing bitterly, "Good hostess, I can see that everything burns in your hands. I liked you from the first time I met you." The time for confessions had begun. Camille knew it would be soon. She could barely keep her heart from going into her chest. "I don't even know how to thank you for everything," Camille said. "You don't have to do anything. People should help each other. I've been wanting to talk to you about an important topic for a long time. I don't know how to begin." The woman looked boldly at the doctor and said with a sincere smile, "Finish, don't be shy. I am a simple woman, I will understand everything." The doctor was silent. Then he took out of his pocket a pack of MP smoked, hiding his eyes behind a cloud of smoke, and quietly said to us, "Camille, you'll have to live here for a long time. My wife divorced me and left, and your husband is nowhere to be found. I would be happy if we could be together and walk side by side through life." Camille sighed, and her face blushed. She tousled her unruly hair and said in a trembling voice, "Liam, darling, anything but that. I'll never cheat on my husband as long as he's alive, and he is. I will wait for him always. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it's my bitter truth. He's the only one I love." "All right, that's enough. I understand," said the doctor sorrowfully. Camille jumped out from behind the desk, threw her coat over her shoulders. The man didn't let her go so easily. He jumped up next, tugged her hand, and nestled it against his lips. And the women? A voluptuous wave, like a poison, swept over her passion, to plunge headlong into the tenderness this handsome and determined man was showing her. The woman wanted to give up, but managed to overcome her feelings. "I'll go, I'm sorry." "Wait, take a melon. Give it to your son as a gift from me." The doctor did not look at it, studied the gift, and turned away with annoyance. "I apologize if anything is wrong. Happy New Year." The doctor bent down again to kiss Camille, but she jumped out of the door, frightened. She liked the man very much, and her soul was drawn to him. But Ethan was waiting at home, complaining daily about the lack of life in this hell. Camille stepped off the porch, saw the black sky above her, rare stars, but hurried home. Her son met her grudgingly. "What took you so long today?" "It's the end of the year. I had to clean up properly. I've prepared the table. Come on, let's celebrate." "The doctor gave you a melon. Where did he get it in the middle of winter?" "Is there such a thing?" Ethan smelled the melon with pleasure. "How was the party at work?" "It was fun," his mother asked, remembering that the workers wanted to have a corporate party. "What kind of fun?" "No girls, hardly any. The workers jumped to the balalaika. That's all. But now, it'll be the weekend. You'll have a rest," Camille said, thinking about Seliverstova, how she would now work with him, and how to behave in general to pretend that nothing had happened. A day later she came to work, noticed that the doctor sadly meets her gaze. "I feel awkward. I'll have to change jobs," Camille thought. "I'm so used to it. I'll have to do something about this place. It would be nice to get out of here altogether." The days were quiet but dreary. Liam pestered Camille, not letting her breathe. The woman felt she would give up just a little more. But a month later she received a letter from Michael. He said he was working at the mine, but he'd fallen ill. He is now undergoing treatment. The letter was short but warm. Michael was waiting to meet his wife. Said he loved the man, never broken by prison. The event stirred. It gave Camille the strength to wait for Michael's return. But she had to move now so her paths would never cross again. The neighborhood center found her a job bagging cotton. She rented an apartment. There was room for Ethan, who had moved to a higher position. A new life began for the boy. He liked it better in the center, as there were no entertainment in the village, and here there was civilization. Cinemas, swimming pool, gym, and other joys of the modern world. The boy made a lot of friends. He was rarely at home. At that time, his father pulled the burden of prison life instead of his son. Work in the mine, where Michael was imprisoned, was hard and dangerous. With poor nutrition took a lot of energy. The man tried not to think about the fact that he would have to live like that for another 7 years, for which he was sentenced. From time to time there were accidents, flooding, methane explosions, and people died in the mines. No one tried to save the prisoners. The only lucky thing was that there were freelancers working nearby who treated people with understanding and humanity, even though they knew they were criminals. The workers shared bread and hot tea from thermoses. Michael bitterly realized the wrongness of this life. The native son never repented. Moreover, he cut his father out of his life, while strangers showed him sympathy. What was there to live for? The strength was leaving the man, who was losing interest in his existence. Sometimes the man returned with thoughts to this world to cheer himself up. He thought that it was not by chance that he had been given this trial. Diseases did not take him for a long time. However, the daily breathing of coal dust for 2 years still had a bad effect on his health. Michael developed a dark spot on his lungs. The disease began with a strong cough and high fever, so he was put in the hospital. While they examined and treated him, Michael, in his spare time, took up the notes he had been writing in his head for a long time. However, they were just diary notes. He wanted his manuscript to live on, and his son read these notes and understood everything. In the ward where Michael was assigned, there were other patients who distracted him with complimentary conversations. Someone tugged on the man's shoulder. He flinched in surprise, turned his head, saw the faded eyes of one of the TB patients. "Let's go play cards, clerk." "I can't. I don't feel well." Another time waved away Michael, dissatisfied that interrupted his musings. "What are you writing?" "It's calling." "But write. We won't be here long," replied the coughing patient. "Why are you throwing your germs around?" The man was indignant. At the voice, a nurse came running in to stop the outburst. Everyone is having a hard time as it is. Setting aside her paycheck, Camille collected help and sent the money to her husband for treatment. Thanks to the help, he bought himself a warm place in the office. He was able to transfer to a lighter job in a building instead of a mine. From time to time, he carried gifts to the doctors, and they put him in the hospital, and treated him as best they could with the medicine they had on hand. Had there ever been sick people in Hippol's ward and pause? Michael gazed up at the starry sky through the thick glass on which droplets of moisture crawled. The realization of his son's meanness once again weighed heavily on his soul. The man leaned back tiredly on the pillow. He felt that it became difficult to breathe. His heart ached. He lay for a few minutes, waiting for relief. The pain in his heart was growing. He thought that he should ask the nurse for some valerian, though he was still afraid that they would not give him some poison. However, he got up and quietly, so as not to wake up any of the patients, went out into the corridor, where there was more clean air. After 3 years, Michael was released. He immediately decided to go to his wife and son, whom he had not seen for almost 10 years. The long road stretched in time for almost a week, and the desire seemed to be the meeting. He decided to forget forever what he had to endure in prison. He rode in silence, glancing sternly at his fellow travelers. No one wanted to tell about his sufferings. I believe that they had faded into oblivion. Fear, camp, death. People in detention died of hunger. Cold was forced to endure suffering, humiliation, abuse. The pain he experienced had to be thrown out of his memory and soul. Otherwise, as he realized, it would be impossible to live further with an exorbitant resentment against himself, his relatives, and friends. Forget. The wheels of the train were knocking when the boundless steps spread out behind the car window more than once and warmly. Michael joyfully thought that soon he would see his relatives, and it would be his reward for long suffering and patience. He believed that his son had not only grown up, but also strengthened his soul. That means that he would accept his father and repent of his deed. The small town where Camille and Ethan lived was not far from the station. I drove to it. Michael easily found the right street and house from the address. He knocked on the door. A tall, bearded man with clear eyes opened the door. Am I in the right place? His father didn't recognize this man as his son. I'm looking for Camille. Does she live here? It's my mother, the man said, confused and resentful. So you, Ethan, are my son? The guest exclaimed in surprise, looking into the stranger's face. I am Ethan. So you are, father. But you don't come to me with nonsense. I don't want no prisoner for a father, and don't you dare say anything to your mother. I'll pretend for her sake that I'm glad you're back. You should be flogged. Parasites, such ungrateful in his heart. His father suddenly hissed. His eyebrows moved menacingly and glanced from Papeliev, about to give his great-aged son a thrashing. But he didn't have time. Footsteps were heard. A woman with a tired face came out to the noise. She said hello, looking intently into the face of her guest. So did he. And suddenly, Michael, through the fine wrinkles and shadows loomed the forgotten face of Camille. The man rushed toward her, stepped forward. She recognized him at last, and with a surprised cry, Michael returned. She fell against his chest. He put his arms around her and stroked her head. Camille shuddered. Stop it. Why are you crying? It's all right, her husband said. You're breathing so hard. What's wrong with your lungs? Concerned, she asked. It's a legacy from working in the mine. But I have not had tuberculosis. Don't worry, it's not contagious. How did you get there? Why didn't you write? We would have met you. I wasn't at the resort. Camille didn't stay there with me. As soon as they let me out, I ran to you. I felt like it would never end either. I didn't want to die there, and it was unbearable to live. Camille looked into her husband's face and said, Thank God we're together. I feel like you've been through a lot too, but you did a good job raising such a son. I didn't recognize him. I thought I'd made a mistake. Wrong place. Michael hugged his family. The son still held himself apart only for his mother's sake, and he did. But in Ethan's chest had long been pushing, drowning out my sense of conscience. He was ashamed of his criminal father, but he could not forget the day when he committed the crime. He was the one who was supposed to do the time. And then his father stepped in. Nobody asked him to be a hero. The son would have gotten away with it, run, But he wouldn't have done time. Why did the father get so excited? He took such a burden on himself. He should bear the cross himself. And he just lived, suffered in a foreign land with his mother. All because of his criminal father. The son couldn't stand it any longer and left the yard. Michael and Camille sat on a bench and sat for a long time, remembering something from that long ago past, when the son was still very young and did not remember much. It was good and light for them to sit together and feel that there was something very important in this life that united them, despite any obstacles. After they entered a pleasant dwelling, well furnished, clean and clean, plenty of food. The furniture is new. Sit closer to the table. Maybe you want to eat. The wife fussed with care. I don't want to eat, but I'd like some water. With love and gratitude, replied the man, still not believing in his return to the fact that the hard years were behind him. Tell me, how did you live here? Yes, everything is fine. We work slowly. Camille went to work every day. My son was in the service too. He hardly ever came home. A terrible secret. It was weighing him down. The father irritated with his frightening appearance of a man who had been sitting for many years. For the first time in many years, Michael had enough free time to finally put his notes in order. After painstaking labor, sent the manuscripts to the editor. His only copy, without letting his son read the story. From the editorial office came a polite reply thanking him for his labor and asking him to wait a little longer. With the release of the book, Michael realized that no one took his work seriously. Dreams that he could become a recognizable writer crumbled. It was replaced by a bitter realization. No one wants it yet. Great disappointment gripped his soul. Michael lamented his fate and became angry with his son, became silent and irritable. Over time, his health deteriorated. The man went to bed outside in the open air. It was hard for him to breathe. His heart was pounding, almost flying out of his chest. The doctors said the climate wasn't suitable. However, the family had no intention of staying here any longer. Ethan's contract could be terminated at any time. As soon as the son finished the third term of the contract, they decided to return to their native village. True, Camille did not immediately agree, as I imagined that Midrozhkn and his nasty daughter Maria, who gave us no life. I don't want to think about Karachevo. She spoke anxiously. Let's stay in the Far East, such a beautiful city. Not Camille. My health is weak. I want to die. I'm at home among strangers. I want to retire to my native land. Objected Michael. You will live without thinking of death, asked the wife. I've been wanting to go back for a long time, said the son. When did you come to an agreement? Camille was surprised. The first day you came back. It was clear right away. I don't belong here. Again, Camille was on the road, buying and selling things. Michael was packing and getting the luggage ready to go. Ethan was gone all day. Somewhere on the street, he was saying goodbye to his friends in the service. A girl Ethan was friends with wanted to study to be an actress, dreamed of going to Moscow. She called him to come with her. The man was still ashamed of his father's dark past. The truth about him and his family might come out. It would be embarrassing. Let's do this, he told the girl. If you go to school, I will come to you in Moscow, find a job, and help you in any way I can. If you don't get in, you will come to me in Karachi, and there together we will decide how to live on. It's a deal. The girl agreed easily and put her hot arms around Ogai's neck. A week later, she came to see Ethan off at the train station. In the presence of his parents, the guy felt constrained. He only stared intently at the girl, trying to remember her as beautiful as she was now. When his mother called, he retreated a few steps, stopped, waved, and jumped into the car. Then how long was the ride? No matter what Ethan did looking out the window or lying down with his eyes closed, he saw only a girl with blonde straight hair in front of him because of the separation from his beloved. The meeting with his native village was not as joyful as he had dreamed and imagined. The old station building looked the same as before. The same tall trees welcomed green branches under the hot wind. Sparrows flew down in flocks, and landed on the platform. To the returning family, it seemed as if they were back in the old days, and when they looked, they noticed that they didn't see a single familiar face. Michael went to the station square, saw a young cab driver, asked him how much he would charge. He replied that the ride was not expensive. They drove in silence, looking at the surroundings, and did not recognize the former places. New trees had grown, disappeared, and the fields were overgrown with weeds. The cab driver tried to speak, asked who they were, where were they from. Michael evasively explained that they were traveling for work. But, as they say, well, only where we are not. That's why they come back to their homeland. Now many people are looking for easy money. They go far away. The guy answered. That was the end of the speech of the car about the body by blood. Turning onto a field road, which quickly led to a small forest, opened Shorter Cow. Michael, with excitement, immediately noticed 3 new buildings nearby. He easily recognized the other houses, mentioned the owners, looked into the yards where someone's children and grandchildren were huddled. Life went on as usual. Maybe only now the man realized the tragic nature of human life. At the end of the village, they asked the cab driver to stop, thanked him, and walked to their house. They looked closely at the trees, sighed at the native odors. They wanted to see their farm as soon as possible. How come? The house is long gone. All that's left is daycare. Bitter, Camille exclaimed. The family stopped at the yard, which was nothing but a pile of stone. Ethan struggled to keep from snapping and yelling at his parents. He wanted to go to the city as soon as possible, rent an apartment, and live a normal life, without shame or fear of anyone. Everything's gone. What kind of people? Angrily, Camille said. Did you think you had a palace waiting for you here? Overcast, smiled Michael. At least they left the stove. Everyone needs a stove. How can you be so calm? I'm happy to be alive and free. Will we build a new house? Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to them. I see the criminals have returned to them. William came. Well, you tore down the house, and now you've come to rejoice in our misfortune. I'm on the offensive. Camille, you're wrong to attack me. People thought you were gone for good, so they took everything of value. William started making excuses. There's nothing to be sorry about. Your old house was worthless, and then that little man came along whose wife your father had killed. Ethan shuddered and turned away. So he and his men used it for firewood. Buy a log, and I'll help you build a new house. Wow. Camille dismissively threw the figure of the aged district officer and asked, why are you from the bosses to the builders? I've been in simple ones for a long time. Young, literate people came to replace us, and we have done our time, served the fatherland. How is your family? Michael asked. No, I've already buried my wife. She was in the hospital for a month, and then the doctors said to take her away. Let her stay at home. They prescribed some pills, and she drank them, and one day she didn't wake up. Easy death. In the coffin, she was lying so beautiful, so calm. I couldn't even believe she wasn't alive. Left alone with his daughter. Smith stepped with his nose. People are leaving. Michael said quietly, where are we going to put the new house? Camille asked. We'll put it here, said the man. Maybe we shouldn't. This place is unhappy from the beginning. The wife hesitated. We made him happy. Orphaned, the family stopped, looked back at the ruined yard, and each of them imagined the future house in his own way. But for some reason, they each saw the one that had stood here before, so familiar and native. Only their Ethan wrinkled his nose. Everyone wanted to get to the city, away from their parents. Michael looked into the well. Glimpses of oxen, water black as oil. Our well is blocked. With a grudge, he said, we'll clean it up. Camille replied calmly. The Mansfields moved toward their brother's house. He was sitting on a bench, interested, watching the people who were approaching him and did not recognize him at once. Only when Camille said hello. The brother got up joyfully and began to hug and kiss his relatives. Look at me, Camille. I have become so faded in voice, he said. and tears kept running from his eyes. "It's disgusting to look at myself in the mirror. What's the matter?" "As long as your soul is young," my sister said. "I'm not young either. Over the years, my husband didn't even recognize me right away. You're here for good. There's no home. You'll live here for now. Let's go inside. I'll buy you something God sent." The guests had just sat down to eat. An excited Christina came running in, hugging her sister, crying and laughing, wiping her tears and saying, "You're back. How many nights have I not slept? How long have I thought about you? Enough. That's enough. Calm down." Camille stopped her with a smile. Christina stepped back and turned to her nephew. "My God, who is that man?" "Ethan, is that you?" "Me? Who else?" Barefoot replied the boy. That's how the cavalier grew up. There was no limit to the peasant's joy. She immediately began to tell about the village news. After a little while, a message came from the girl Ethan that she had entered the theater institute. But Ethan never went to see her in Moscow. Instead, he took a new job in the city at a security agency, settled in a hostel in the service. He wanted to save money for a trouble-free life in the capital. Now the money he had saved up was not even enough to buy an apartment. The boy quickly learned a new profession, and he even liked it. After all, he dreamed, like every boy, to protect from trouble, guard, and even save people. In the first few months, he wrote the name Anna on his shoulder, then immortalized his beloved, who was always with him now. Soon the guy was promoted, appointing him deputy head of the security service. Soon the unexpected happened. Anna sent a long message thanking him for his understanding and longtime friendship, but informing him that she had met a great and true love. She wrote that she had married a good man and was happy that she could. Unites not only love, but also a common cause. Plus bragged that she had already been invited to a movie shoot. Ethan read the message and realized that he had lost it forever. Life had lost its meaning. A new blow struck the unhappy man like a punishment from heaven. A sin committed in advance. What was he to labor for now? Work? No life. Ahead instead of the future is darkness, where there is no love and never will be, and no pity for his father. What kind of monster is he? Because of him, his own man spent more than 10 years in prison. He sacrificed himself. And who is he? He's nothing. For 24 hours, Ethan lay on his bed facing the wall, clenching his teeth to keep from screaming with hatred and powerlessness. At night he tried to sleep, but the voices in his subconscious woke him up and kept him awake. Daddy's daddy ran him over. In the morning, the boss called, ordered to report to work in a severe psychological disorder. The man entered the office to the management, sat down with his head down on the table, and go to work. "Hear you what the resort ordered." "I cannot," replied Ethan. "What can be sick, so go to the hospital." "My soul hurts," quietly answered the guy. From grief, he lost his strength and could not move. In fact, it turned out that it was better to die. They keep the mentally ill in the nut house. Go to work. The boss jumped up to your subordinate and slapped him on the cheek. Ethan suddenly looked into the eyes of his interlocutor with hatred, suddenly jumped up from his chair, grabbed a clerical knife from the table. Polos kicked himself in the stomach. Blood in a narrow strip marked the wound and began to drip to the floor. The boss turned pale and screamed in a frenzy. Ethan slumped helplessly to the floor and closed his eyes. He felt neither pain nor fear, and a moment later he lost consciousness and did not hear how he was carried on a stretcher to the car, how the surgery was done, how he was placed in the intensive care unit. He woke up in the evening, saw a man in a white coat above him, and asked, "Why am I here?" "Did you have surgery?" The doctor answered. "Surgery?" Ethan asked again. "And only now I remember everything." "How do you feel? What hurts?" "Nothing." "What about me?" "Cut my skin. Did a little damage to my intestines, but thank God I was hungry this morning. So there were no complications. It could have been really bad. Think about it. What do you value more than your own life, or some unpleasantness that threw you off balance?" "I will." Only I can't beg for your forgiveness now. I'm a worthless man. I don't deserve to live. Just lie still for now. I've got 12 stitches. Make sure they don't come apart, or we'll have to sew them up again. Just don't tell your relatives." The man asked. The doctor left. Ethan tried to turn on his side and felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. He tried to feel his stomach. It appeared to be all renamed. Again, the resentment against himself came from far away. Thoughts of Anna shifted somewhere in the background. He shoved it away. He raised his hand to nail his hair. The movement echoed with pain. He regretted now that he had been so intemperate and had almost destroyed himself because of some woman and a foolish impulse. His father had given half his life for him, and he'd almost wiped out those efforts in one fell swoop. He had no right. He's the only one his parents have. How could they be without him? The thought of his family finally touched the callus, as it had seemed to the boy before. He brushed away the tears sternly and firmly decided to live near his mother and father, to help them at the construction site as long as they were alive, as long as it was possible to please them with their presence. 4 days later, Ethan was transferred to a ward, and after a couple of weeks he was discharged. He suddenly returned to Karachevo. On the threshold he stood with his head down and tried his strength. "Batya, let's go. We need to talk." Michael looked sternly at his son, realizing in advance that the latter had realized everything. "Father, I'm sorry. I don't know when you'll be able to forgive me. I have no right to forgive you. Your forgiveness will be yours, son. It's all behind us now. If we can't change anything, there's no point in rehashing the past. Thank you, Dad. I didn't deserve that sacrifice. Things will be different now." His father turned away, a man's tear running down his cheek. Behind him, pain, beatings, a dark past in custody, all for the sake of his favorite son. But the boy lived freely. That's the main thing. First thing the mom noticed was the tattoo. She got really worried. Why would he do that to that girl? What's he gonna do to himself for her? Michael's reaction to that was very restrained. "Who cares about us?" the husband replied calmly. "You'd better ask why the son came back from the city early." "Why the son?" Ethan smiled strangely and replied cheerfully, "I'm fed up with everything there. I want to take care of my parents. Everything I've saved up. Let's spend it on a new house, a 2-story one." Camille was suspicious and asked insistently if you were joking, son. "Did something happen?" "Nothing happened. I had an operation. You can't work after that." "What surgery?" "Worried?" asked Michael. "And I know they cut something out there." "Show me," the mother said. Ethan, sighing, pulled up his shirt and showed the red scar on his stomach. The parents stared at Ethan stunned. "Oh, my little son," cried the mother. "They gave me anesthesia. Nothing hurt me. Look, how much can you eat? I'm hungry. Or are you going to starve me? The kid's sick for fun." "I'll be right back," answered the mother and fussed at the stove. They smelled familiar dishes. Ethan felt happy and free for the first time in a long time. The weight of guilt had been pinning the lice to the ground for almost 15 years. Slowly it dissolved. "We can start a new life." In the evening, women's voices were heard outside the window. Some were singing, laughing. Camille pulled back the curtain, looked outside, but saw nothing. The girls were already sniffing. "That a beau has appeared in the village," muttered the mother. "Now I'll go and disperse everyone, not travelers." Angrily, she said, "Hide him under your skirt. The kid's too old," noted Michael. Ethan, meanwhile, without a word about the family, slipped out the door. He returned in the morning. Camille was beginning to resent him for sneaking around and keeping her parents up all night. The husband stopped it. "Let the boy live. He's not a little boy anymore." Ethan smiled warmly. His father sipped his milk, climbed onto the couch, and a moment later his steady breathing was heard. Camille was working in the yard and thinking about her son. It would be good for him to continue working in a new place. They could take care of the house. Maybe they should go to the apartment, But the thought of living within four walls now dragged the woman. She got used to life in the village and did not want to return to the city. But she did not want her son to be pulled into the hard village life. What was the point of working without a salary? To live on the farm when you have a profession? Michael soon got a job as a watchman. Camille, too, was thinking of going to work the way one should go to build one's house. The son, too, was looking for work in town, especially since it's only about 15 kilometers away. If he got a good position, he could buy an apartment. It was time to start a family. Now Camille dreamed of waiting for grandchildren. She didn't rush her son to take over. She wanted him to rest, to gain strength. How much hard work had he endured? Busy with her thoughts, she did not notice Christina entering the courtyard. She sat on a bench, put her hands on her hem and said, "You work hard, and you don't know what your son is doing." "Why?" Surprise raised his eyes. Camille glared at William. "And met, that's what." "How do you know?" "The whole village is buzzing. Sophia is bragging that Ethan has promised to marry her. And that's all the unhappiness we need." The mother clapped her hands together and looked anxiously toward the palace, where father and son were sawing wood. "I'll show him, Sophia. Anything you don't pile on the lad unawares," stopped Camille. Christina, knowing how hot she was, to talk to him quietly, affectionately, in a motherly way. "Explain what's going on. Tell me how you've been leaning in for over 10 years. I'll give that girl a drink if she doesn't give up on the guys," shouted Camille, who couldn't contain her anger. Maybe on purpose so her son could hear. "You're so stubborn. No matter what you're told, you do it your way." Michael spotted his sister in the yard, left work, came over, said hello, asked her how she was doing. "You know how to live. Don't have your own house. Don't get upset." "Sister, I'll build a house. I'll take you in while you build a house." "It's like that," said Christina. Ethan was chopping wood. Camille looked in his direction and said, "Michael, hear what our son has done. Sophia Sam has been visiting. Christina says that the whole village knows about it." "When did he have time?" the husband said calmly. "It's gossip. Ask him yourself." "All right, I'll ask him," Michael agreed. Christina adjusted the handkerchief on her head. "It's hard." "Oh," got up from the bench. "But I'll go. I'll take care of it myself," she said. Camille invited Camille to join us. "Thank you. I'll go. I'm walking slowly now, until I get home." "That's how I'm going to have dinner." "How sly." Camille thought of Christina. Doesn't want to mess things up with her nephew. Everyone wants to be nice. But Sophia's a viper too. Michael can't be lured. She wants his son so badly. It won't work. The gate slammed behind Christina. "What do you want?" "Like a mouse on grits?" Michael asked, thinking about what to do. "Do nothing. Or is he stupid to get married so soon?" "Not into you. He's a success." "Maybe because I raised him myself. He only looks like you. He didn't have a father around. Who should I look up to?" "I'd like to talk to him now, because I've lost it. I hate that girl, you know." After lunch, Michael deliberately waited until Camille went inside and started talking to his son. "What are you going to do next?" "I'm going to look for a job. I think I might stay here." "We're here." Surprised father. "It's almost free to go to work and have nothing from it. That's how people live. Only idlers live like that. Maybe you've already decided to get married." Ethan smiled and answered, "I think I'll have to get married at some point." "Is it really with her?" "Why?" "She's a pretty girl," the son said, happy to hear what he hadn't dared to tell his parents yet. "You know how many such pretty there are in the world, 1,000,000, and you need to choose one, which you will love all your life unsatisfied," said the father. "I'll get married." "I'll have one." "Why put a clamp around your neck so early? You still have your whole life ahead of you." At that time, Camille entered the house and said indignantly, "Don't you remember, Ethan, how we were almost killed because of Verka's father?" "Children are not responsible for their parents," Ethan objected. "What's the matter with you two? Sophia wanted us dead too. Are you ready to warm a snake on your chest?" Camille shouted in a huff. Ethan looked at his mother's face in confusion. He rushed to the door, grabbed his jacket, and sprinted out of the house. Just as mad and stubborn as you said, watching out the window for his son Michael. Where did he run to? Camille asked anxiously. Don't worry, he won't go drowning. Like you did when you were young. What have I done? When will he come back? I'll go crazy if he's gone for a long time. Calm down. Let the boy think about what we told him. It might be good for him. The husband comforted his wife. What's going on in there? Asked the brother who entered the yard. Nothing a little. She yelled at her son. Did he take offense? Replied Michael. Ethan returned to his parents. 2 days later said he got a job as an engineer in a construction organization in the city. He was temporarily living in a hostel. Camille was overjoyed. She asked what you, my son, will do there. I'll be a senior wherever they send me. I have to justify my profession. My father was happy. The main thing is that they gave you dormitories. I'll help you build a house. I'll buy the apartment myself. The son looked at his watch and warned. I've come to get my things. Camille calmly thought that he would probably give up Verka if he suddenly changed his plans so abruptly. God forbid you should be related to that family. You should at least visit us, your mother asked, and leave an address so I know where to find you. There's nothing to find me. I'll be fine. I like the city. You don't get bored there. The son replied cheerfully. You just be careful, son, not to get into fights. Oh, always you, Mom, something that makes up. I only want to eat as soon as possible, because I'll be late for the next bus, Ethan answered, dumping his suit, shirts, and underwear into his suitcase. The son ate with gusto, and his parents watched him with amusement. Their son's bloodline. The daughter has grown up. The boy is on his feet, and he needs his parents only to check in with them from time to time and show them what he has become. How long ago did you celebrate your 16th birthday? All right, I'm out of here, Ethan said. God bless Eddie. And remember what I told you. I forgot about Sophia a long time ago. You really should. There are plenty of beautiful girls in town. Michael only smiled, listening to his son and remembering how hard this son's happiness had been for him. When Ethan left the house, Camille said sadly, Ethan has left again. Now it's just you and me. Why alone? My brother's napping on the sofa. Christina's coming over. Soon the grandchildren will come. Nowadays, girls are clingy. Not like in our time he didn't dare to hang on their necks. Michael laughed. The next day, Camille went to the city and got a job on the railroad. She had to work 3 shifts, receiving construction materials. Now she rarely saw not only her son, but also her husband. Even on holidays sometimes could not meet. Those who accidentally met Ethan in the city said that they often saw him drunk, walking around town, checking out the diners. Goes home and doesn't show his nose. Michael went to see his son at work, sat down, opposite and coldly, bespeaks that not even 10 years have passed. I've been in detention from call to call. Was it for this? The son looked sorrowfully from behind his eyes. He shamefully averted his eyes. I won't live by my conscience. I'm sorry. Camille several times visited her son in the dormitory, but there did not always make him. It wasn't until New Year's Eve that luck struck. Camille and Michael were at home together waiting for their son. He did arrive, but not alone. Along with him walked in a beautiful hair, a girl smiling, friendly. Meet my wife, Ethan announced from the doorstep. The mother shuddered like a wife. Where from? From the city, originally from Minsk region. Works in a cafe as a cook. Anyway, he cooks good food. I won't go hungry. What's your name? Michael asked. Ludmila. Sweet to my heart, Mila answered father and invited me in. Come in. The table is set, just waiting for you. Everyone looked at the young people and wondered, what a beau. Never married, never married. But you have a wife. We got married. But thank God, Camille nodded. Michael helped the unexpected daughter-in-law to take off her coat, led her to the table, showed her the place. filled the glasses with wine, and said, "Here's to the happiness of the young people. Live in harmony and love. May your dreams come true, and we old people will rejoice in your good fortune." You all drank wine. Only Mila barely killed. She doesn't drink. That's good. Not depraved, Camille thought, and asked when was the wedding, son. Yes, we had a wedding. My 2 boys and my 2 girlfriends. We went to a restaurant, had a few drinks, and it was over. Camille remembered that she didn't have a real wedding either. Everyone has their own destiny. So where do you live? Worried, Mother asked. My sweetheart and I bought an apartment, bragged the son, with a movie in his eyes at his father and mother. We have to start building a house, said the father, and us. We'll build. The family has increased. Do we have guests to meet? Michael smiled happily. Let's drink to the new year. May it help all our plans come true. Bitter, Camille proclaimed loudly and solemnly. Mila looked shamefully at Ethan, but he hugged her and kissed her heartily. Michael smiled contentedly and thought, after all, my son has justified the life I gave him. Gave him 12 years of life. In the spring, Mansfield began construction on the subway. The man was still helping out. Even when he wasn't invited to the site, he put up walls. His son helped. Over the summer, they put the roof on, built the furnace, even built a barn to house the livestock. Then my granddaughter Zoya was born. The daughter-in-law moved with the baby to Ethan's parents to help nurse her. Camille gave the baby all her love and tenderness. Michael marveled as he watched his wife. She was up in an instant, happy, as if the feeling of youth had returned to her, and the grandfather himself liked to amuse himself with his granddaughter, listening to her delicate voice. A year later, the daughter-in-law gave birth to another grandson, Jack. The house became crowded and noisy. Camille felt happy. Then came a letter from Camille's older sister, Wendy, who had lived in America for many years. She had already been told the news about her son and grandchildren. Someone complained to Wendy that Ethan was a bad son, not inviting his parents to his wedding. What does he like to drink? Michael knew many of the relatives, out of jealousy, were ready to embarrass a man to make themselves feel more important. Of course, maybe Ethan is not a perfect son, but not worse than others hold the family. Loves his wife and kids. And as for the shot, who doesn't drink nowadays? I was surprised by something else. Living 1,000 kilometers away in America, Wendy was eager to find out about his family, to influence Camille and Ethan. His Michael was persistent in calling him to visit, luring him with his wealth, bragging about the 2-story house where she lived happily with her husband in a rich and free country. In one message, she suddenly wrote Camille, "No need to go. Come alone, I'll show you all of America." She persisted in reminding me that she was childless, which meant that the American inheritance could go to her son Michael and her grandchildren. After all, there were no other heirs. Still, Wendy missed her homeland, dwelling on references to the past. All the more so because she had once had a crush on Michael. He'd felt it at one time and hesitated to choose a wife. He liked the thoughtful, intelligent, well-read Wendy. But Camille was impulsive, selfless. Managed to tie him to herself, however, she moved old age. Michael was afraid to admit that he was gradually losing his sight. The strength was leaving his body. What was next, God knows. However, it was necessary to protect his son and his family. He pulled himself together and wrote a long letter to Wendy and her husband. "Hello, dear Wendy and Noah. Received your letter, for which we thank you heartily. Glad you are doing well and are healthy. Enjoy your life. From seeing friends and from working in the garden, I thank you heartily for inviting me to visit you. However, I'm convinced that I won't be allowed in. You know my background. Besides, only close relatives of the father's mother's brothers or sisters are allowed abroad. I'll tell you about Ethan. He used to like to hang out when he was single. Now that he's got kids, it's hardly ever the same. He's good to me and Camille, to his wife. He celebrated his wedding very modestly, only with his closest friends, as he didn't want to burden us with the hassle. Come and meet his family and see for yourself. He's a good family man. We are happy to have grandchildren in our old age, and we're happy that everything worked out great for our son. Our daughter-in-law is beautiful, neat, and cooks well. She is from the village. Work is not afraid. The only trouble is that old age is already reminding us of its presence. But everything is fine. We wish you success, good health. Greetings from our large Mansfield family. He decided to take the letter to the post office, although the day was frosty, but the breeze was already warm for spring. On the way, Michael went to the store where the villagers usually gathered to wait for fresh bread to be delivered. This time, there were several old men and women gathered there. One elderly man was quarreling loudly with a sales clerk, Shina. See what a bitch she is. She cheated me out of 20 cents. You think I'm old and can't count. Sophia threw 2 coins on the counter and yelled a 20 at you. Just get out of my face. You're getting on my nerves. I'm gonna punch you in the face. I don't care if it's a grandma's grandpa taking the swing. If you try to call the police, they'll soon calm you down. Sophia started threatening me. I'll file a complaint today. You won't cheat here. Enraged, the customer promised. Michael pulled the old man by the sleeve and said, chuckling, still flipping with a hammer. And the collection of what? To make it die. Cholera, it's eternally out of balance. Let's go out for some fresh air. Let's remember our youth. Grandpa's angrily scooping coins off the counter. Michael, you're the only smart man I've ever respected. They left the store. At first, they talked about the farm. Only then the man noticed the mailbox hanging on a pole near the store and got excited. He dropped a letter in it. Come on, I'll walk you home. Come on. The 2 old men stomped along the village, looking at the houses where once lived other people who had long ago moved to the cemetery. Now the children and grandchildren of the deceased walked through the village and resembled their predecessors with their facial features. The cycle of life in nature, smiled Michael. And I'm still living. And how do you feel? He asked. When I woke up this morning, I think my fingernails were the only thing that didn't hurt. I'm all beat up. And when you wake up one day and feel nothing hurts, you'll know you're dead. He laughed. Ugh, what are you saying? The old man was angry. No matter how it is, the time to rest will come. When it comes, then we'll talk. Now come on, what's more fun? How many grandchildren do you have? 2. I have 5. I even have 1 great-grandson. I'll outdo you. The peaceful conversation made Michael think of his complicated life. He walked home and thought that many things could have turned out differently. Christina met him at the house. Why are you frowning? I've been thinking. How long have I lived? I've done nothing good. I don't think I've ever done any sins, but I still have enemies in the village. Who am I interfering with? Christina looked at me for a moment, and then suddenly she burst into tears. It's all because of you. You're the reason I'm alone. You didn't let me get married. You stole my youth. Quietly, Christina came out. Camille. People around. The woman frowned and walked away. Michael nervously invited his hair, helped before him by the influx of fog. Sometimes Michael feared that someday the day would come when the white light would be covered by an unsightly fog. And then no, death would follow. But should he blame fate? He's had a good life, thank God. How many men died, and those who worked at the mine with him? How many boys didn't return to their families? That everyone has his own fate. I chose it myself. I go as far as I can. As far as I can. Soon Michael was sent to the hospital for a checkup. He could no longer work as before. A committee was to determine his competence. The diagnosis was disappointing. Mansfield suffers from a mental illness in the form of schizophrenia. The cost of my sacrifice is exorbitant, the man thought. Michael left the hospital tired and devastated, not knowing whether to be happy or sad that he had been declared mentally ill. This diagnosis is the bitter truth of his life, from which it was difficult to come out alive. But he came out, even if his soul was maimed. Bodies of fallen leaves stirred underfoot. Autumn was moving in on the city. Michael walked down the boulevard towards the train station. Wendy sent more and more letters and parcels from America. It was obvious that she longed for her family, but was afraid to come to leave her settled life. However, she insisted on bringing her grandchildren. Camille made up her mind and traveled to America. Was it scary? Of course, she would have liked to take a family member with her, but Michael wouldn't go. He's been declared schizophrenic. Ethan has a tattoo on his shoulder, and his wife has a different name. The daughter-in-law is taking care of the kids. Wendy's anxious to see her granddaughter. But it's not advisable to take the girl away from school. There was no point in taking Christina with her. It would only spread gossip after the village. After weighing all the circumstances, I decided to go alone. When the papers were prepared, put on Camille's simple black dress, took all the necessary things, put them in a backpack. Weary of the train ride to Moscow, she slept through the entire flight to America. At the airport, she was met by Wendy and her sister's husband, who hadn't seen each other in over 30 years. They didn't recognize each other right away. Wendy took a long look at the people who were coming to meet her, until she realized that the tall, thin, aging woman was her own sister. "Are you Camille?" I answered the younger sister, looking at the small, chubby, pink-cheeked Wendy. "How have you aged? It's disgusting to look at," exclaimed the American. I stare at my sister. "I'm tired. I work nights on the railroad, picking up construction materials. And when I come home, there is no rest either. Household, yes, grandchildren." Wendy suddenly cried, hugged her sister and kissed her. "You're my martyr. Meet my husband, Noah." Camille held out her hand to the old man with the dark glasses. "Hello, Noah. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the letters and packages." "Hello," my sister's husband replied, and held out a large bouquet of yellow roses. "Let's go to the car. Tired on the road?" "No, I slept the whole time on the airplane." "Thanks for the flowers." They got into the shiny white car and drove through a city with tall buildings, bright advertisements, and lots of people on the streets. "Look, Camille, New York is the richest city in the world. America is a free, happy country where even a working man can buy a big house and live there. Do you also have the opportunity to move in with your family? Your grandchildren will have everything they need." Wendy said inspirationally, "I care about that. After all, they are my blood too. It is true that Noah has kinfolk too. The house will have to be divided, but I think we can make a good arrangement." "I wish to God you'd say that," Camille said. But she was bored with the city. Her heart yearned to go home. Wendy visibly parted. The body on the round face was choosing and NOSIK. Her sister had dyed her hair a golden color, so she looked much younger than her years. To a nice pink and lilac dress, very suitable, picked up in the tone of lipstick. Next to her was her younger sister in a black dress with a gray head. "Felt old and ugly. You look good. I'm glad that you, of all our kin, are lucky enough to live in prosperity. We've had a lifetime of grief to remember. It's all right. You'll get some rest. We'll spruce you up. We'll buy new clothes, and you'll be a goddess. Wendy wants to live young, until she is 100 years old." Noah said mockingly, "Would you like me to go down like a hen and run around you?" "You won't." The wife replied irritably, "I, thank God, do it myself. I do not need to run around me and hide from old age in vain. I'm tired of your philosophy." The wise man was found. They drove out of town, rushing along the wide highway for quite a long time. Wendy kept asking about her family. At last, they entered a small town. There were low buildings with typical red roofs. Unlike New York, there was plenty of greenery and flowers. The car stopped near an attractive two-story house. "This is our house coming out," Wendy said. While Noah put the car in the garage, the sisters walked down the driveway and planted on both sides with colorful roses. Katya's house was really furnished with tasteful rooms, glowing with warmth and coziness. "Good, you have with delight," said Camille. Everything shone, shining with cleanliness. Wendy set the pre-prepared dishes on the table, fed her sister from the road. then led her into the small room. This is the room we keep for guests. Getting Camille settled in, all stood on the threshold, looking at the curtains and covers of the cathedral. It's all so beautiful. It's scary to touch, she said. Don't make it up. Lie down, rest, and I'll sit with you. I don't sleep well now. I wake up many times in the night, and then I can't sleep. Tell me about yourself. How are you here? We haven't seen each other for so long. It's okay. It was hard at first. Then I got to know people, learned the language. I got a job. That's how it was. I got along with Noah. To tell you the truth, I regret that I ever tied my fate to him. They wanted to send me to India to work. I didn't really want to go there. That's when I was introduced to Noah. What, Noah? Camille asked. That's what Noah is called in American. Well, when he found out, he decided to help. He agreed to give me a sham marriage. He wasn't a bad man, but I didn't like his looks. But over time, we became friends. We bought a house together. Noah had the first floor and I had the second. He supported me financially. I got used to him. 2 years later, we got married for real. I got pregnant, but I couldn't carry the baby. I had an operation and was warned that there would be no more children. That's fate, Wendy sighed. But you are happy here, and you have a son and grandchildren. And soon you'll have great-grandchildren. I think your grandchildren are mine too. I comfort myself by understanding that they are in these walls and the beauty of happiness, and in the children and grandchildren life has passed. You can't turn back anything. Wendy sighed. Rest, we'll make another deal. She smiled sadly, waved from the threshold, and left the room, closing the door behind her. Camille woke up out of habit, washed her face early, got dressed, and went down to the first floor. In the kitchen, Noah was sitting at the table drinking coffee. The pleasant aroma of the drink filled. The kitchen seduced. Good morning. The guest said hello. Smells good. Good morning. Noah replied cheerfully. You'll have coffee. Don't mind Wendy. My wife likes to lie in bed. The host got up, seated his guest, poured her coffee, opened the refrigerator, took out smoked meat, 2 eggs, and began to fry scrambled eggs. You always cook for yourself, because I don't trust your sister. She tried to poison me once. God be with you. Noah, what are you saying? Camille exclaimed in surprise. I'm telling the truth. Do you understand? She was living with me. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at some sectarian guys. I'm tired at work and don't realize what's going on with my wife. And she tells me she doesn't want to live with me. Let's sell the house. I told her, live with whoever you want. I'm not selling the house. If your lover loves you, let him take it without the house. She screamed and cried. It happened. I don't want it to happen. That's when it happened. I came home from work on a hot afternoon, got a bottle of beer out of the fridge and took a sip. And there was vinegar in it. Wendy poured it in for something. I ended up in the hospital, had stomach surgery. Could she have done it on purpose or not? I could have been prosecuted. But I loved her. I forgave her everything. Noah put the scrambled eggs on 2 plates. He put one in front of Camille and invited her to have some American eggs. Yes, it's the same everywhere. But you know, Noah, I don't believe Wendy would do this on purpose. I mean, she's always believed in God. Noah asked me to take over the kitchen while I'm here, asked Camille. With pleasure they ate, drank coffee, smiled at each other. A good relationship was immediately established between them. Wendy entered the kitchen. He grumbled unhappily. An oppressive silence settled at the table. The hostess took small sips of coffee and said without addressing anyone, soon the guests will arrive. We have to get ready. What can I do for you? Asked Noah. Go to the grocery store, buy some milk and fresh bread. Understood, replied Noah, and humming under his breath. The jolly man went out. Death will come to him, and he'll sing songs to her too, said Wendy irritably after her husband. Why do you keep gnawing at him? He's a kind man, sociable, cheerful. He's a slacker, not a bad man. I hate him. If I could, I'd stab him with a dull knife. Don't start Wendy in the morning. Is that what's tearing your heart out? Do whatever you want. I'm going to go to the apartment for a bit, and I'll see what's wrong. What about you, making the menu yourself? Camille stayed in the kitchen. She went about her usual business. She did everything quickly and spaciously. When Noah returned from the grocery store, the kitchen was bubbling and smelling delicious. The guests arrived at 12 o'clock, all sitting around the table, eating, praising Camille's skill. At the table, cheeky girl Emma pissed off Camille in every possible way, mocking life in Russia. When the guests finally went home, Wendy went to see them off, and Camille and Noah stayed at the table. That relative is sad. People have forgotten how to be happy and cheerful, said the host. In the morning, Wendy came to her sister's bedroom and sat on the bed, complaining of insomnia. She really looked tired. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Thank God, I sleep well. I don't sing at home every day. I go to bed late and get up early. I'll rest at your place like at a resort. Listen, I keep wondering how Michael let you go. What if you stay here? You know, we don't care about ourselves anymore. As long as the kids and grandkids are happy, and you can stay here with me if you need to, I will. Even if you don't see your husband again until you die." Wendy asked in surprise. "How long do we have to live? Don't you love him?" "You never loved him." Wendy shouted indignantly. "I put up with everything. Never betrayed him, never reproached him, never demanded anything. I waited for Michael from all prisons, from all roads. You know how to make a man's head spin. My old grandfather is capable of nothing. And he's being questioned to do something nice for you. Noah is a good man. He's trying to please me as a relative. You're sly." "But I'm not stupid," said Wendy. "I'm not leaving you at home. I'm taking you to the Russian convent. There you will sit and wait for my death and inheritance for your grandchildren. How will they bury me? Then dispose as you wish of what I will leave you in the monastery." The sister marveled. "Can I do that?" "Why not? You know what? This isn't a very sincere speech we're having. I realize you're still alive and well. Wendy, I wish you live a long, long life, and my grandchildren are groomed and fed. They'll be fine without your inheritance." Oh, I'm offended already. "Get in the car. Let's go home," said Wendy. "Why would I be offended? You invited me. I came, I saw you, I talked to you, and thank God. It's time to go home. People will laugh at me if you go that fast. Let's go shopping for presents. Do whatever you want," the sister said indifferently. The next day, she and Wendy went to the supermarket to buy presents. In the evening, Camille was awakened by a touch on her shoulder, opened her eyes and saw Wendy, who said guiltily, "You're asleep." "And I can't sleep. Something's keeping me awake. I can't figure out what it is. Tell me about your grandchildren." "Nice kids. My granddaughter is learning to play the piano. She draws beautifully. They're friends with each other. That makes me happy. It's hard for me to imagine your life," Wendy said sadly. "We have everything here. There seems to be no problems, but there is no happiness." "What did you see happiness in?" "I wanted to have a big friendly family of a husband, beloved children and grandchildren. And I have none of that. How did you, sister, take my destiny? Destroyed me." Bitterly, said Wendy. Camille sat up on the bed and asked what was what. "You have no idea. I really don't know what you're talking about. You have your own life, but you stole my destiny. It was I who should have been with Michael." With reproach and with tears in my eyes, said Wendy. "But what is he to be with you? Not to listen to you, not to tell you himself how he lives with you. He chose me. I've loved him all my life. What's that got to do with you? I don't understand. I've loved him all my life. I've only thought about him. And he writes me wooden sentences without feeling." Camille looked at her sister. She knew that Wendy had once liked Michael, but she couldn't imagine that her older sister had carried those feelings through her life. "Michael is a different person," Camille said. "He didn't love you, he loved me. You can understand me. You're the one who drove him to this state. You made him schizophrenic. If I had been with him, he would have been a wonderful man. He had everything going for him. Natural intelligence, charm. You poisoned his life. What kind of soul do you have? Your head and your soul are empty. I hate you, your son and your grandchildren. I hate you all. Wendy rushed to Camille, grabbed her by the throat, began to choke her. Her sister broke free, turned away. Is that what's bothering you? Go get your Michael. I'll see how you handle this job and the ideas. Camille picked up her bag, started dumping her stuff. Are you going to go? You're not going anywhere. I'm gonna send you off and bury you here. I'm going to Michael. I know what he loved all his life. I'm the only one. Are you crazy? Camille answered calmly. Noah came into the room. He said, "What's going on here? Get out of here like a rotten bitch." Wendy shouted angrily. Camille, what happened? Asked Noah. Nothing. I want to go home. Please help me buy a ticket. Michael sat on the bench basking in the last rays of the autumn sun. Footsteps were heard. He turned his head and was surprised to recognize the familiar figure of his wife. Though he couldn't see her face yet, had she come back from America so soon? He wondered. I don't have a sister. Did you have a fight there? Camille said nothing, heading for the door. What you go with, you come back with. What do you want? Then go on your own. Why did you come here so angry and good? I don't need anything. How are the grandchildren? They're fine. Yesterday my daughter-in-law came to visit. She said they're all healthy. That's our greatest treasure. Camille's back. Maybe she brought a present. Christina shouted, I brought you a present. I'll give it to you later. Camille was quiet. It had been a joyless trip. The return was the same. Would you tell me anything? Asked her to live well. Americans live well, but even their happiness is not given to everyone. Happiness does not depend on money and the fact that you have a 2-story house with a mirrored bathroom. You see, everyone is unhappy in their own way. And if someone is rich, they can still come up with 100 reasons to be unhappy. You tell me about Wendy, how she asked for Christina. That's what I'm talking about. She's got a house, 2 cars, but no joy. There's only anger, irritation, old age, and fear of death. Sister fights with Noah. Noah takes offense. That's their life. Camille took some beautiful colors out of her bag and gave the handkerchief to Christina. Thank Wendy for not forgetting about me. It's not Wendy. I bought it for you in Moscow, and my sister didn't give it to me. She promised to send you a package. The woman lied, not wanting to talk about her fight with Wendy. All right, I'll wait. Michael, leaning low over the desk, taking notes. Even though he was almost blind, he kept a diary. Today there's an entry in his notebook. It's a warm, sunny day. Fall is late. Camille came back and said that America has everything but happiness.